Jennifer Rodriguez. Here. Cynthia Ritchie. Here. Shannon Marybon. Here. Cynthia Sotomayor. Margaret Gustafson. Yeah. Jennifer Delaney.
Present.
Rebecca Good.
Here.
Christian Besega.
Here.
Bryn Rowe. Patrice McCarthy. Here. Elsa Batista. Here. Tiffany Collette.
I am here. I'm gonna jump off and come back because my camera won't come on.
Okay.
So I'll be right back.
Bob Sartoris. It's like, I don't have my list.
I think we're gonna. Yeah, I think we're gonna just, Sarah, Jenny, not here, right?
And they both said they couldn't come.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, welcome everyone. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Had a chance to enjoy the free weather. A lot of things that have happened over the past week or two since we last met. We have special guests here to do some presentations. As part of this, we have representatives from CPRO, Performance Office, SDE. We got lots of folks here. So thank you all for coming and helping us move this work forward. To those online, when you want to participate, just raise your hand. Dr. Ritchie is actually watching that list and she will kind of write down who's next. We'll go back and forth between in-person and online folks. A lot of folks online today. All right, so let's go ahead and take a moment to look over the minutes from the last meeting. Adjustments.
Hi, Jennifer. I saw an adjustment needed to be made for the spelling for CAPE. It was spelled CAPE like C-A-P-E instead of C-A-E-P. And it was in the minutes in 4 different places. So I would be in support of adopting the minutes with that modification. Or I would like to make a motion to adopt the minutes with that modification.
A second. All right, seconds. Any discussion? Right, seeing none, we have adopted the minutes.
Oh, like I thought that was just, I did with one little other page.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, she was saying adopt with the change. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Can I amend that adjustment and
Sure.
not in addition to the CAPE adjustment there on top of page reference to students already have passed practice or the content knowledge examination. And I think that was supposed to be practice this.
The motion is to amend
Amend
practice to praxis and all the CAPE.
to CAE.
All right, are there any other adjustments? Any conversation? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and adopt as. Thank you for noticing that. All right, next on our agenda is some updates. Chloe, administrative hiring process.
Sure. We don't have anyone hired full-time yet, but with me here is Natasha Dunaway, who I emailed introducing. Natasha and I are going to be working collaboratively with this group to make sure everything's running smoothly for the time being.
For the update.
Yeah.
And welcome. All right, proposal update. So,
I just have a question about the hiring.
sure, go ahead.
I raised my hand, sorry. About the hiring of the administration, what, did I hear incorrectly that we had hired somebody and now we do not have somebody hired?
No, no one was hired.
Oh,
There were
okay.
finalists. Yeah, but I
They were-
don't have an update. I believe it's in the HR process.
And do we have any indication around this group of finalists and the amount of time it would take to then hire from this group of finalists?
I've only shared what I know. That's really all the info I have. I wish I had more.
And just to be clear, we interviewed like the final two and the finalist is kind of going through the process. Like two finalists are going through the process with the HR department, but it was down to two.
Okay, all right.
That helps. Yeah. All right, so any other questions about that? So proposal update, I had met with Representative Leeper and Senator McCrory. Dr. Rowe was also at the meeting, but as a EP representative at the behest of Representative Leeper. And CPRO was listening in because they're helping us kind of craft language regulations. That way they had an understanding of where we're going with this. Overall, it appears it was about an hour and a half meeting. Senator McCrory and the education committee seem amenable to adopt our language, but he does have a priority that he would like to see this board address. And that priority is having either like a year-long, after completing their, sorry. After completing all of their tasks, their coursework, it's specific to alternative route kind of programs, having an additional year under a mentor or supervision of a admin or superintendent. So that was kind of his priority that he had in there for us to discuss. I did give that information to Kristen as the chair of the ad hoc committee that is working on that, to see if that somehow fits in with the work of the ad hoc committee already. But he did seem amenable to our language to move it forward. And once this meeting is over with, I will ask him an additional meeting, just kind of give him a follow-up. Any questions on that? Next on the agenda is the performance office. Jeet will be giving us an update on the Bridges pilot and report satisfied 1286 of our statutory obligation. I will hand that over to you.
Sure, thank you for asking for this update at the last meeting so that we could provide it. We did submit the code report, which I trust you have in front of you. Maybe you had a chance to review it. Would it help if I took maybe 5 minutes to just walk through it?
Yeah.
Or
that would
do
be
you
great.
just want to launch right into questions?
I think.
Some updates? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So I'll do this first and then pivot to the Bridges, Praxis Bridge pilot. Not really Bridges, but the Praxis Bridge one. So let me start with this report here. So there are a couple of sections in statute that pertain to data reporting around the educator workforce and the pipeline. So subsection 10-150D, subsection A, requires this board to develop standards and proposals, regulations and legislation regarding a statewide data dashboards that enables longitudinal monitoring of workforce data. And so we wanted to show you in this report numerous existing reports that already track workforce data, and I'll review that in a moment. And the next subsection talks about qualitative data on stakeholders' experience and quantitative data on vacancies, shortages, and EPT, the educator program dashboard. So we have the quantitative data covered, and the qualitative data, there's a couple of pieces that we have, but I'll discuss where there might be some gaps that you may want to consider. The other section really is old law that was passed in 2015 that pertains specifically to the Edge Prep program dashboard. And I'm still, by the way, on page 3 of the report. I'm starting on page 3. So And I'm in the introduction section, the second paragraph. 10-146H is the one that talks about the EPP dashboard, and it says it must contain, X, Y, Z items. And I'll review sort of what the dashboard has, and again, what it doesn't, and what are different ways in which we're going after the data. And I've already discussed the dashboard at a prior meeting, so I won't belabor that point. Where do all these data come from? At least the quantitative data. There are several pieces of data. So we have certification data, which is basically any candidate who applies for a certification. You may have heard of the CECS system, and several of you probably have accounts in CECS and are renewing your certifications in CECS. That's where an educator handles their certification activity. So that basically says who's the person and what certification they hold. Another system is the employment system, and that comes from the district, where they tell us who is working in the district and under what assignment have they been given to work. And so what we do at the state is we compare what they're assigned to teach with what they're certified to teach to make the determination of, are they certified for the grades and the content for which they are actually teaching. So the employment information comes from the district. We also have data from the Higher Education Act Title II, which is in Connecticut, for Connecticut, is actually data that's collected by ETS on behalf of the state. It's collected by ETS. The higher education institutions submit data on their candidates and completers to ETS. So that's another sort of disparate data source that's out there. There's a couple of sources of student data that the state collects from districts. So one is PSIS, Public School Information System, which is the enrollment data system. And that's where we have student demographics. And most importantly, the SACID, that's the student's identification number in our data system. Districts also tell us something called through the teacher course student data system, where they tell us which teacher is teaching which subject to which student. So it's the link between the teacher, the student, and the course that they're teaching. The teacher, the course, student. So that's the linkage. So the EIN of the teacher is connected to the SACID for the student, and then it's connected to the content of the course, the subject area of the course. So that's another piece of data, and you'll see how all these kind of are needed to do all the stuff that we're doing. The last piece is the team program, and the team program, as you know, is for new teachers. It's the mentoring program when they start their teaching journey. And there is a separate data system for the team data that's actually by statute. It's housed at UConn, at EastConn. And the team data collects some candidate feedback. There are some qualitative survey responses that those candidates give to the team modules of classroom environment planning, instruction, assessment, and professional responsibility. So it asks them how their EPP prepared them to do in team. So those are all the different data sources. So what data do we already have on EdSite? And before we get into EdSite, you should know that EdSite has two parts to it. One is the public part that everybody sees publicly, but then there is also a secure part of EdSite where we have the student level data. And that part is only available to authorized users. And a couple of years ago, we actually built a place where EPPs can actually log into EdSite and also see their own candidates and where they are working. So they get information about their own candidates, as well as praxis assessment information is also available to them. So EdSite, again, important part is there are two pieces to EdSite. There's a public and then there's a secure. Okay, so now I'm on page 6 of the report. So when we look at workforce data, there are numerous reports. One is called the staffing report or staffing levels, which really presents FTEs or full-time equivalents of the educators who are employed. And that comes primarily from the employment data that's reported by districts. And I've included on page 7 a screenshot of that report. So it shows you for all those different assignment categories, whether it be district central office, school central, school level administrators, counselors, social workers, psychologists, general education, paraprofessional, teachers, instructional specialists, et cetera, et cetera. For all those roles, certified and non-certified, we show you the number of FTEs, full-time equivalents for the state, but also for each district and school. So you can actually disaggregate down to that level. And this is collected every year, and what's reported on EdSite is the October 1 snapshot of the educator workforce capacity. So it's what was true on October 1. The idea of October 1 is that, you know, the year has started and then give some time for staff and students to stabilize, and then we collect that data. We also have a vacancy dashboard. Again, remember, that's one of the required elements, and that's something that's relatively new with COVID. And we do it twice a year. We collect from districts through a survey. There's another data collection source, actually. Vacant positions that are budgeted and that they're actively trying to fill. So it's not a position that they may wish to fill. It's something that exists, that's funded, and they're actively trying to fill it. And so we started collecting that. We collected twice a year. So that report is also available publicly, and every year, twice a year, that those numbers are updated. Just last week, we released a educator attrition report. And this report presents turnover rates for educators, certified educators in Connecticut districts. It looks at classroom teachers, which includes special education and general education teachers. And then it sort of gives a look at all certified educators, which includes administrators. And it sort of presents that turnover rate, if you will, for teachers and all educators. And again, that's available at the state and district levels. We also present groupings of districts. So you can look at turnover rates in charter schools versus turnover rates in public school districts versus regional school districts versus endowed academies and whatever. So you can actually see different types of school districts. Bottom of page 8, we speak to the shortage area determination. So the shortage area determination is not a separate data collection per se. We're using our employment data. We use staffing ratio estimates, students to certified FTEs. We sort of compute some estimates there. We use the vacancy data. We also have pulled data from CT REAP and looked at what are the common job postings. And that's not something we do every year. We do every few years, because we need stability in these shortage area determinations. We don't want these to keep changing every year. So the most recent analysis was done in 23. We worked with our partners at BU to conduct that. We provided a lot of data, and they came up with the report, and we include a sample screenshot of our shortage area designation memo that goes out. Top of page 9, we also have a ed diversity dashboard, and you've all seen that. That's another sort of workforce level information that we provide. And one thing that most people who are viewing the public data may not know is in the secure system of EdSite, we actually have a report that's available to all the users in the districts and schools that gives them a list. It's just a list of names with email addresses of all certified teachers in Connecticut, certified educators in Connecticut. Going back to, you know, anybody who is actively holding a certificate. And so you see a screenshot of that on the bottom of page 9, and it lets people, every user really, and this is used extensively. So in case for those certified educators, you're wondering why you're getting all those emails from districts. This is one of the biggest reasons probably why, because they can actually search, filter, and email people about recruitment notices. So we put that out to help improve with recruitment and hiring. You know, that's been in place for several years as well. But that's only available in EdSite Secure. It's not available in the public domain. Now on page 10, we moved to the educator preparation data. So all of that was workforce sort of data. Then we moved to the ed prep data, and I've gone through this dashboard. So I'm not gonna reiterate it here. And this dashboard actually pulls together the Title II database, CECS, and our employment system to try to pull all that together to put this dashboard together. And it merges those data and generates a whole bunch of statistics around the number of candidates, the number of completers, certificate issuance rates, licensure pass rates, employment rates 1 year out and 2 and 4 years out, as well as employment rates in alliance districts, which we deem as, schools in the alliance districts, which are like that. Schools. I think the one point I'll make, the statute calls for first attempt pass rates. But as we went through the process, and I've mentioned this before too, is that over 40% of the individuals who complete our programs, actually their first attempt is before they even finish their final year. So we have not chosen not to report the first attempt publicly, but actually report the best attempt publicly. But as far as the EPPs go, they can actually see the first attempt for their candidates within the EdSite Secure system. So they do see that. And but when it comes to public reporting, we report the best attempt. And also for employment, another important caveat is we only know the people who are working in Connecticut. They go and work in Massachusetts or Rhode Island and New York, we don't have that data. So dashboard, employment metrics always have that sheet. There are a few challenges relative to what the statute, explicitly says, and speak to how we've addressed it so far. The 10-150D calls for this board to collect and review qualitative data on stakeholders' experiences. But it's unclear, it doesn't define who the stakeholders are, so that's sort of a question. And so we don't have any sort of extensive data on qualitative data on the stakeholders, if you will. There is one study that we did commission through our research collaborative that looked at teacher and leader perceptions and turnover during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. And that study is nearly completed. But the full study has not been released because we had to actually pause that project because of the change in the liquidation deadline from the US Department of Education. So that was funded through COVID relief funds, and we had to tell all researchers to pause their work. So that report is not completed because that did do in-depth case studies in 6 districts with lots of interviews, and there's lots of qualitative data in there that actually might be of interest. But that kind of it's on hold right now. Hopefully we can wrap it up and release it. One of the requirements in 10-146H, this is now the EPP dashboard statute from now almost 10 years ago, that's still there, asks about the effectiveness of the EPP graduates. And often this comes down to the effect of the graduates on the students they teach. And that often boils down to growth on standardized tests and value-added estimates. That approach has set some significant limitations. The big one is that it only affects a small percentage of the graduates. Not everybody ends up teaching in a grade where we have test scores from the state assessments. So that's kind of one of the big issues. But we are in conversations with our research partners at BU to see if we can do a study on it. Instead of doing this annual reporting, which I don't think is really feasible, we're looking to do a study to see if we can do some sort of more scientific approach that can we learn something from these data if instead of an annual report, we actually do a more sort of control study, maybe pooling multiple years of data to look at the effects over time. So maybe we have some power in the analysis as well. So that is something that we are currently in conversations with our partners on. And again, so it's not only the tested grades and subjects. You should also know that the moment you just look at ELA and math, you're only looking at ELA and math. You're not looking at anything else. And obviously, a teacher's effect on students isn't just ELA and math. There's so many other things. So that's a limitation. I'll just put that out there. And the last thing is, in terms of qualitative data, the one thing we do have is the team data system and the feedback from the candidates who are going through team, and their feedback on how well the EPP prepared them for the team modules. So that I have seen sort of initial data on that. It's just, qualitative feedback, but they've not been aggregated or anything, but that's one potential avenue that we could look at for qualitative data. So, but to be clear, we do not have qualitative data currently on the employers themselves. So we don't have feedback from districts, for example, on how well they can. I mean, we have anecdotal, informal conversations, but no sort of regular sort of follow-up or and none of this has appropriation, by the way. There was no separate appropriation for any of this, but we managed to do as much as we can. So I'll pause there and take any questions on this report before I get to the practice bridge.
So let's open that up. Rebecca, go ahead, and then Kristen.
Thank you, Ajit. That is super helpful. We want this information because we want to, one of the reasons I'm sure we want to make data informed decisions as we look towards the future of accessing the profession for aspiring educators and retaining educators. When a report is released, there's a lot of reports. Sounds like there's a lot of dashboards. I think some of the challenges may be just in where they all live. How do you get access? So what is the process when a report is released? Is it just posted in a central location? Because they're not all via EdSite. Or does it get emailed out to certain groups? Like, how do we know?
Yeah, it's a great question. So majority of these are EdSite reports, and when there is, but like the shortage area one is not a dynamic report, but if you go on EdSite to the staffing levels, actually, on the very bottom of that page, we always list like related links for any particular report. So often we post documents there too. But anytime we release something like this, there is a notification that's sent to the commissioner's superintendent list, if you will. And that list includes all the superintendents, but it also includes boards of education, partner organizations. So one of the things that I'm going to make a note after this meeting is to see if, when appropriate, or maybe in all cases, not that you want more emails, but perhaps the certification board could be copied on some of those emails so that you're all receiving those frequent notifications as well.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to be on the commissioner's listserv as board members. And then if we have a question about, man, we really need, like, I need to think about this direction we're going, and I want to see a report like this. Do we reach directly to you, or who would we contact to see, instead of having to spend the hours trying to find a report that might not even be there, who would we contact?
I would say Chloe is your main point of contact.
Okay.
And for every question, and Chloe will redirect internally as necessary, or figure out where to get the answer from. I mean, she's obviously super resourceful, and so yeah, if you have a suggestion or a question or a set of questions, she can totally. If it's anything, if the word data is in there, I suspect she will come to me. So yeah, I would start with Chloe.
Start with Chloe.
I'll
Thank you
add
so much.
to- No, that's fine. I also am like the reports person at the department, so it's likely that it lives in my brain to like where I need to go. So always ask any questions you have.
Kristen?
Thanks, Ajit. So you had mentioned that there's a public facing dashboard, one for like special sign-ins for administrators and superintendents and boards of education, and another one for EPPs. Can you talk a little bit about what's on the public facing site that an active teacher might be able to see without a login?
As it pertains to educator data,
Yes.
so everything that I've listed in the report here, except for that active endorsements report, but anything that, so the report on bottom of page 9, that it says educators with active endorsements, that would not be available on the public site.
Mhm.
Because that's only in the secure platform, because that contains educators' names and their email addresses and what certifications they hold. It's not secure information in the sense that if we got FOI, we turn it over. That's not the
That was
issue.
gonna
It's
be
just
my
that
next question.
we don't, we don't broadcast it on the public site. So it's available on the secure site. But other than that report, everything else in this document is available publicly. The team survey feedback is not available publicly as well, so that's something that's within the team system that's accessible to the department. But other than that, everything else you see in this report is available publicly. And if you were to go on EdSite now, and if you go on the educator menu item, you'll actually see the report that I've spoken to just now. Including attrition, diversity, ed prep, educator vacancies. There's one other report that I didn't speak to today, necessarily not directly pertinent, but we also have a report on mental health staff ratios. We actually show the ratio of FTE capacity of counselors, social workers, school psychologists, et cetera, to students by district and for the state as a whole. So that's another report that's available publicly.
I've seen that one, and that one's really helpful because when we have staff that are specifically for mental health supports, they want to know, well, is my caseload within the effective caseload? I think it's like 500 students per school psych and things like that. For There's a report there for classroom teacher attendance that's on the public site. Do we have any ideas of what that information is used for?
It's something that I'm not sure how actually it is used at this point. It is something that we're required to, it's been there, I mean, that particular data element has been there probably for 20+ years in our collection, and it's an average sort of FTE absences and something we've had since the beginning. It's included in our profile and performance report, or strategic school profile, if you will, what it used to be called. And so that's basically the requirement that is there, but I'm honestly not sure the extent to which it's used. But it's just remained in we do have a couple of those types of things floating around.
Yeah, they were just mandated statutorily, so it's there.
Right, it just stays there,
Do you know for classroom teacher attendance if that includes people who are on child rearing leave? So if you were out for 4 months, does every single one of those days counts as an absence in this reporting?
I'd have to go back to the documentation. I don't want to just give a quick answer here, but there's a lot of complex guidance on it. We don't collect it at the individual teacher level. We collect an aggregate from a school. So it's not something we have for each person. But we do have guidance that kind of walks the district through what exactly should be included. And what I'll do, if that's okay, is send Chloe a follow-up after the meeting that she can then forward to everybody, so you can see the full detailed guidance for that reporting.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Sorry, go ahead, Jude.
Icky. So I know that this is a journey that's been ongoing, like, I just even do the dashboard, and I had 2 questions related just to kind of catch up to where I last left off in the story. One is benchmarking. Are there states that you look to as building out these dashboards in a way that are kind of aspirational for what we would like to move closer to, that are maybe more dynamic or give even more information at that qualitative level that we could be learning from? And then my second question is around the employer input. I know at one point we had an employer survey drafted, and wondered like, what is the roadblock? Is it just a deployment and, you know, just the capacity to?
I was told that it's a capacity issue, that we don't have the resources to implement it, but that's the extent to which I know. I remember our efforts to try to deploy something, but I don't know beyond that. What I was told was that it's a capacity issue to actually do it.
And then other states that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was looking to Lauren if she has any,
I mean,
if you have anything, come on up.
yeah, I could just say
So
anecdotal.
just hang on, just come on up and then so everybody can hear.
And anecdotally, from looking at other states, ours is actually one of the more robust ones. And in fact, New York was recently reached out to us to find out how we went about building ours. So I mean, at least on the ed prep side, shows more than any other states we found and is more dynamic. But certainly we haven't reviewed every states to know, you know, things may have changed, but I'm just thinking offhand, New York, when they reached out, had made a point of saying, in doing a scan of the whole country, it was robust.
And if there are others, you know, we're absolutely open, obviously. So if there are others, we're more than happy to look at them and see what's feasible.
Yeah, at the time, when I was working at the department and we were part of that the NTEF network nationally, I know Delaware, Washington, and California, I think, and Louisiana, the ones that kept coming up, but I don't know if they've kept these.
Yeah, I remember Delaware, and I remember talking to their folks, but yeah, I don't feel like they add anything more. At least Delaware has, I don't know, if they have more than what we do. But if there are those names, we will check them out. Happy to. Where in California? Yep.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. Some of our southern states provide more robust data for CAPE. And I'm wondering, when we were in the council meeting last year, you had mentioned that there might be a possibility that we'd be able to provide more information so that we can fulfill our CAPE guidelines. I'm just wondering if there's been any work in that area.
Is that pertaining to the student impact data? Like the impact of the candidates on students, is that the part that you're asking about particularly? As it pertains to CAPE?
Correct.
Yeah,
My understanding is some of the complexity is like in the states where they're doing that data sharing. I think they also are not teacher union states, if there's some kind of complexity when it comes to that. And like Ajit said earlier, we only have certain tested subjects. So you'd have to be able, like the state would have to have a data sharing agreement of sharing student performance data back to EPP.
yeah, as far as the reading and math tests go, like I was saying before, I think it's limited. Just because of the number of graduates from each of these programs. The study that we're doing with Boston University's Wheelock Center, one thing we will do is ask them if, after their analysis, if any reporting at the EPP level for individual EPPs is possible. If it is possible, we will absolutely share that with you, because I would feel much better about sharing a more scientific study and the results from that than just descriptive sort of data, because I'm concerned that that's not really gonna be lead to an accurate inference. So I will take, Catherine, your request to say that we will talk to BU and see if it's possible. To the extent possible, we will provide institutional level feedback on student outcomes.
Thanks, Ajit. I think it's important for the board to just understand the requirements for CAPE, especially as we move into a CAPE renegotiation in our contract, because we have certain requirements for CAPE and we need to be able to retrieve that data. And that's always a challenge for the EPPs. And being that I'm here to represent the EPPs, I just wanted to make everyone aware of that gap.
Yeah, I think it falls under standard 4, correct? Majority of those. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Margaret. Thank you.
Just wondering if you can tell what is available from the team. What the reports come from there.
I don't know when, no. Not.
The EastCon dashboard for team is really designed to show module completion. So educators complete, I believe it's 5 team modules. And the EastCon dashboard is a mechanism for the mentor and the mentee to document, what is the, what is the goal that they're working on and when they complete each module. The data that Ajit was referencing is when that 2015 legislation came out, trying to ask for essentially like completer satisfaction about their EPPs. In order to be able to gather that, they attached that survey to the team module. So for example, when a candidate or a beginning teacher is finishing their team module 1 on, I think it's project management, they would then be answering the questions like, how well did your EPP prepare you for this, and this? And it wouldn't just be for in-state completers, it would be for any completer, but the dashboard is really more a mechanism for team completion, the team dashboard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so kind of looking back to legislators' request to look at mentoring.
Yeah, they have that, I think.
How this process more.
Well, team is 3 years of mentoring. So, I mean, all beginning educators who work in public school in Connecticut are assigned, the superintendent on the board, they're assigned a team mentor for the duration of the team process. They're expected to complete it in 2 years, but they get an additional year if there's extenuating circumstances. So that's already an established practice.
I think it's interesting to call it out that way.
Maybe it's just that there's not enough visibility around what's happening.
So one of the other pieces that's happening with our research partners is an evaluation of the team program. So that is actually in progress as well. And as part of that evaluation, all of that EastCon data is being turned over to evaluators as well as student outcome data, so that we're also going to try to tease out the effect of a mentoring program on student outcomes, where that makes sense. So that is also an evaluation that's in the works. My general recommendation when legislature, we have conversations with the legislature, is to not make things annual reporting requirements, because that's invariably how they end up writing these things. And some of these things are just not suitable for annual reporting requirements, but we can learn something through a study or something like that. So, and these things don't change annually, or there's just not enough numbers to report meaningful results. So, but that evaluation is underway, and maybe that will be of interest to the legislators as well. I know Cynthia.
I was just gonna add, Margaret, can everyone hear me? I was just looking through some notes on it. Is also what we're also evaluating is the timing of when educators can go through the different modules. And is it appropriate to give them the first year time to just adapt to being in their classroom? And does it make more sense as to when they get the classroom management module? If it's that you focus on, not to say you wouldn't get a mentor throughout your time, but really looking at, are these modules effective, the timing of the module, and what would best suit the needs of our new educators? Do they have too much on their plate, especially being brand new, beyond what they get from student teaching? So it's looking at all of that. Our person that's assigned to this process is Ashley Wright. So what may be beneficial as well, depending on what the council thinks is best, maybe having her come and share or give an update on what is happening beyond what has been shared, because she has more. We are really looking at the timing of how to best meet the needs of our new educators with support. What does that support look like? because we use that word a lot and we throw it around like, oh, here, you're getting support. What does that mean? And what do new teachers truly mean?
And I remember they talked about the responsibility of the teacher. Very. Coming back to being very together.
Elsa, go ahead.
Is it fair to assume that not all EPP programs are mandated to follow team?
So team is something that happens after somebody's completed their ed prep program and is a certified educator. So it's something that happens after somebody's completed.
So the EPP doesn't run the team program, but we do ask the individual who's going through team when they're a new teacher, how the EPP prepared them for doing, when they do the team modules. So again, it's another way of looking at how the EPPs are preparing them. So, one way is to look at what effect their graduates have on students' test scores. Another way is to just survey them and ask them. Another way is to ask the employers, the principals, the superintendents, like, hey, how are candidates working out for you from this college, from that college? So all of those things are sources of evidence to know how well the EPP itself doesn't do.
Sure. So in relation to the report, are there any additional questions? So Kristen, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to make sure I have it clear in my head, since we are discussing team right now, that team begins after someone has earned their initial educator certificate.
Okay, once they're employed under that initial educator certificate in a public school.
Good. And under a DSAP, you would not start team and they would not assign you a team mentor.
Okay, Caitlin, answer that one.
We do not recommend that educators do team under a DSAP. I mean, has it happened in the past? Yes, it has, and it's an individual decision. But we try our best to ensure that they're at least serving under the initial when they begin team.
Thank you.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Yes, so I want to make sure I'm clear. To satisfy 12A6, we are submitting this report. Do we need to vote on this report? Is that what we're doing? I'm trying to remind myself of what
Sure.
is this presentation is.
This report would fulfill 12A6.
Okay.
For that. However, there are a couple of questions still out there that I think it's going to look into. So I would cater a motion to submit the report to fulfill 12A6 with any follow-up that is sent to the board.
So moved.
Questions. All right, so moved by Rebecca. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Ritchie, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. One. All right, so the motion passes. Thank you. If you want to go ahead and give us now the update on the bridges, and if we have anybody from Praxis here who would like to come up to the table in case any questions come up. Come on up and sit for that in case any questions come up about Praxis or bridges.
So yeah, I understood, we didn't know this, but we learned that EPS was at some ad hoc committee meeting of the board. So we weren't aware, so we didn't know what update was provided, but then we figured out what happened today. So I was not aware, or we were not aware that was underway. So we requested additional data on the status, and what we're seeing is, and we saw this even in the early days, is that roughly about 15 to 20% of the individuals who are eligible to take the bridge so far are actually signing up to take it. Which means that these are test takers whose scores are within that one standard error of measure. So they are eligible to sign up for the bridge, but they have to actually sign up for the Praxis bridge. They can't be forced to do it. But only 15 to 20% of them are doing it. So just to give you some numbers. Since we launched in October, end of October, early November, we currently have. These are test counts, right? Because we have the 4 elementary subtests. One person could be in multiple tests, obviously, they're all taking all 4. So over 2,000 tests are bridge eligible. 2,000 tests. And fewer than 400 have actually registered for the bridge. Pretty much anybody who registers and you give them enough time, they're completing it. And the feedback continues to be overwhelmingly positive, as I shared some quotes in January. The numbers are growing, but we're not seeing enough individuals actually register yet to take up for the bridge. And Lauren, you should come back up here too, just if you're here. You could stay. But I guess part of my question would be like, how can we increase the numbers of individuals who are eligible for the bridge? I believe they're notified, but they aren't actually following through and registering for it. It's no cost to them to take it, and if they complete the bridge, which anybody who starts it is pretty much completing it, and there's no cost, so we don't know why that's not happening, but I'll pass it to.
So just then the question on the table is, if I'm understanding it, Jean, the question on the table is, how are they being communicated to?
Well, I
And
believe,
why are they not?
yeah, I believe we know the answer to how they're being communicated too, because I imagine there's some notification that happens, but I think the point is why isn't that being converted into actual bridge registrations and then bridge completions? Because it's really, success rate is high and feedback for those who take it is very positive.
2,000 number might also be because we did a 3-year look back. So moving forward, if I take, they went back and.
What you sent this morning.
Well, they checked.
This is current.
2,000 since we launched in November. Oh, cool. I take that back. Because we also, in addition, did a 3-year look back so that candidates who may have taken the assessment a year ago were still then notified that they would be eligible for the bridge. But they are notified automatically by ETS once they get their score report and show that they're in one SEM. So I don't know.
You said they are?
They are. They're automatically notified through ETS's mechanism.
If they're within that certain score range, we automatically send a message to them and say that you're in this particular band, you're able to access this particular module based on the data that that we received from your test scores. So at that point, it's up to the candidate to take that next step and actually enroll in the development tool.
I guess I've got a couple. Is there anything else you want to say before I go to some questions? So why don't we start off over here with Rebecca, and then we'll go to someone in person. We'll kind of go back and forth, okay? So Rebecca, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. And I saw Rebecca's hand up earlier and there was a number 1 and then she put it down. Sorry, that's what I had in my head. I'm so sorry, Ann. Ann, go ahead.
That's all right. Thanks, Jen. Are the EPPs, do we have a list of which schools it is? I know that we're doing a lot to reach out ourselves to let the candidates know that this option is available to them. But I'm wondering if there's data on what's happening relative to the EPP and the students who are at 1 SEM. Is there any connection there, or is it simply all from ETS?
EPPs being notified of their.
The notification goes directly to the candidate, but these data are accessible to all EPPs. So if an EPP is looking at a particular student or looking at a particular academic area where it may be of interest for them, they can see all scores at any time.
Right. But I'm wondering whether the EPPs themselves should, we could make an effort, more effort directly to the students to notify them of this option. I mean, that's, I just can't believe it's only 15 to 20%.
So is there a capability of informing the
Right,
the
right.
candidates directly that qualify, like just the list, the adults who, or the candidates who graduated from your program. These few folks fell within this and are qualified for bridges and we've reached out to them, right? Something like, is that what I'm hearing in?
Well, either that or that this is interesting information to have because I can go back and say, look, we need to reach out directly because they're not responding to this. But I don't know how many of our candidates, for example, are responding and how many are not. But we
So
can
that's probably
find out
not-
from just getting the test scores. Yeah, you know, I suppose it'll be an extra step for us, but it'd be fine.
Right. So I guess it would depend on the prep program and the data team that's on those campuses. And whether they are actively looking at those data, because we send data twice a week to all prep programs on Tuesdays and on Fridays. And that can be pulled at any moment of time. So they would have regular updates in terms of the folks that have taken any test in the practice program and those folks that are kind of on the bubble and need to pursue this option. So that would be available to them. Currently, we do not communicate in the way that you're referring, but I mean, that's something that I can certainly take and give an update on.
I
Thank
think
you.
there's some district confusion on folks who are like DSAT, for example, who may not have passed. They didn't receive notification because they didn't fall within the range to qualify to take. But I think some HR departments have heard that it's out there. So they've like reached out to them and said, like, maybe you qualify for bridges. Why don't you contact State Department of Education? So I think there's some confusion even within like local districts on who qualifies and how notification is done. So we there is an email level of communicating with districts.
No, that would be the candidates. That would be the HR, whoever's assigned to it in HR and the candidate kind of feeding the HR person the information. Because they're the ones who get access to that, not the HR. I mean, if you have someone in HR that's assigned to talent development and that's part of their role, follow up, making sure people are certified, and there are, every district does it differently. But you normally rely on the candidate to tell you where they are in the process, or if you have a good relationship with EPP, with your triage.
In terms of specific marketing material, I don't think it would be too big of a lift for us to produce some additional material that could be dedicated towards district staff. And if we had obviously a listserv that we could blast information out, we could certainly share ongoing updates, what's currently in place, what's going to come in the future. And then they could also have an additional contact. If they had questions, then they could have a direct contact to us instead of possibly going to the department and then having to reach out to us.
Helpful. We have that list.
Thank you. So do you have anyone in person before we go to someone else online? All right, Sarah, go ahead.
This is just to help me. If only 15 to the 20% eligible are taking advantage, what are the other 80% doing? Are they just sitting back and doing nothing? And what's the total number? Out of 2,000, how many total as of November had taken the classes?
In the bridge,
No.
you're talking
I
about,
thought you said 2,000 had taken 2,000 were eligible. to take
Yes.
the bridge. Is that, those are people whose scores were within a certain standard error?
this is,
I think this is
Yeah.
over the last 3 years.
I think this is not just this year. Can't be,
Yeah.
these numbers seem larger than.
So we're talking about 4 different subtests and those numbers are different based on, you know, how many times someone has to take a math test versus an English language arts test, but in the couple thousand to 3,000 plus range over the last 3 years. Because I'm sorry, Lauren, as Lauren mentioned earlier, we started the pilot in November and it's been running since then. But we also, based on Connecticut's request, looked back to see if we could capture anyone over the last 24 to 36 months who may have been on the cusp, on the bubble of passing, and maybe they just didn't follow up and take the exam a second time. Maybe they moved on and did something different. Could we capture those candidates and then also, attract them to this particular point of passage to get to that certification level?
So let me, and to help this board, I would say we should get the data on just the current year ones as well, separately, so that the board can see, like, from the time of launch of this program in November, how many have taken the test and how many. I presented some preliminary information in January. It was really small at that point. So I would say we should separate out the period for pre-November 1 and November 1 and after, so that we can clearly see. Because possibly the uptake rate now is better because notification is happening, and people who've taken last year or whatever maybe aren't taking it up. So that we can then sort of figure out, like, is it what exactly is the issue, so that then we can kind of target that issue. And just one clarification, Malik, in terms of the ETS data that's being provided twice a week, would that allow the EPP to quickly filter their data and see who's within one standard error of measure on these 4 subtests? Have we shown them how to do that, or do they know how to do that, or should they know how to do that, I guess, maybe is the question. Because sometimes we think people know, and then they might not know where to look. So if not, could we do a brief session is what I would say, like a quick webinar or something? Yeah, for the EPPs, just to show, like, go here, this is what you do, and then you can find your candidates. Okay. Cool. That's a good next step.
So I'm gonna go back to someone virtually, if that's okay. So Dr. Rowe. And then if no one's in person, then it'll go to Dr. Good.
Great. Thanks so much. And thanks for the information. Thanks so much for coming and giving us your time. I will say that from an EPP perspective, trying to track candidates post-graduation has been challenging because they do change their email. So if you're using their school email to contact them, unless they're in a program, they're not going to be checking that. And I will tell you, they do change their personal email very frequently. So again, when we try to track students for our CAPE accreditation, it's a challenging piece. I've taken to coming up with group chats via text. So that's how I've been keeping in touch with my graduates. The other piece is just for some feedback. Again, thank you for coming. I just want to let you know that my candidates have shared some information with me where it's really difficult once they receive their cut score. Now that's a time we could communicate with that candidate. They are getting their cut score. So moving forward, we can contact them when they get a cut score that is within the SEM. They would be able to get a remediation plan. Alternatively, going back, I will tell you that a lot of my candidates cannot find this information on the website. So the bridge information, the retake information, it has been troublesome for them to navigate to that. So being that would be something that would be more apparent or something we could direct them to would be helpful. I'd be interested in attending a workshop. I also think using some type of social media through TeachCT might be helpful. I think most of us EPPs follow them. So that might be something that we would be able to use to help facilitate this information. And I think somebody was talking, I'm sorry, did I miss it?
No, I think those were all good things. Does anyone need to respond to that?
I added Catherine, I added just to my notes, teach.org to add that to our marketing as well. I'll talk to Siobhan tomorrow.
Thanks for
And
that.
Dr. Rowe, I appreciate everything you're saying, because obviously, we go through that too with our EPP, where can be hard to track people down if their emails have changed, but also a lot of women who have graduated from our programs often change their last names too. So that can be a struggle for us to find people sometimes as well, because their names may have changed or may be different in EdSite. So that's something to note as well.
All right, Dr. Good, go ahead.
Yes, I want to just make sure I have a clear next steps. And so what we are asking as a board is that ETS provide EPPs, the list of test takers within their EPPs that are eligible for a bridge or module. Ideally, that is not us like going through like student by student. It is either it's Tuesdays and Fridays. It is very easily accessible for that list. We'd also want ETS to provide the marketing material so that we can ensure we are sending our students to the proper locations, whatever they need to click on, whatever they need to do to ensure that they are able to take this option, reminding them that it is free, that is not an additional cost. And that ETS, yeah, we do need a better display on the website. It's hard to access that for students. And then I just think what Catherine said about the webinar would be a great idea, and Teach Connecticut should also be marketing. So when we're saying, hey, these are all the things that we believe will help close that, what we're hearing right now is an 80% gap, which I'm hoping those numbers are just like a little wonky or wrong, because that is an incredibly large gap for opportunity. What would we like, when would we be updated on how that some of those next steps can move forward?
Well, let me first say that on the numbers, I think for the next meeting, I don't know when the next meeting is, next month.
June, yeah.
It's June.
So for the next meeting in June, we will bring updated data that's broken out for November 1 and after versus pre-November 1. Because I suspect what you'll see is that the lower uptake is for students who took the test before the program was launched. Because we're trying to quote grandfather some prior students into this approach, right? So I think the communication challenge there might be different from the communication challenge when a person takes the praxis and a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever, when they get their results, they also get this message. I think the uptake might be greater. So we'll figure that out. We'll share the data separately. In terms of the webinar, and just to clarify that point about the list, is the one SCM thing, is that relatively straightforward? Is there a separate flag, or do you have to know what the SCM is and then filter? Like, how does that work? Because I'm trying to make it easier for the EPP so that they can like quickly get that list.
In terms of the
candidate
candidate knowing,
No, in terms of the EPP knowing who the candidates are who are eligible for this bridge.
so we have that available on our site, but I would agree with a couple of folks around the room that it might be a couple too many clicks to get to the specific information. So I'm going to be going back to our marketing team to take a look at how we can kind of bring more of that information to the forefront, along with other conversations in terms of marketing directly to districts here.
So for the interest of time, how about we take the list of things that we heard around the table, and I think Rebecca did really a nice job of kind of, summarizing. And we revisit that with the data in June. And, along with that, maybe having that list, you'd be able to come to the meeting and let us know like which ones are feasible and within what timeline that might be adjustable, or what might need to be added to the webinar to kind of present those issues, as opposed to kind of making the decision here and now, because I think you guys have to go back and kind of look at what is feasible to do. So how about we take that summary of that, like I said, Dr. Good did such a nice job of kind of encapsulating what was discussed around the table here. And Chloe, as part of our notes, can kind of send that to you, to both of you. And then come back to our June meeting with the updated data, and then maybe some updates on that summary of lists of how to tackle that best.
Sounds good.
Can I add one?
Sure, thank you.
Just wondering if ETS, you track click rates on who opens the email. That would be a data point we could look at as well. Just curious if it's just like to Catherine's point, we have that problem constantly where people just aren't looking at their email.
All right, and then I think Kristen had one more, then we're gonna move on to the next thing. Go ahead.
Yep, I just had a question about the Tuesday, Thursday update to the EPPs. Is this how EPPs currently determine if, let's say they had a student who graduated 2 years ago, but did finally pass the praxis, they're applying for their initial cert. Is this how EPPs are currently informed that a graduate has fulfilled their testing requirement?
So there's a portal called ETS Data Manager that every institution has access to, and then there's a primary user on each campus who also gives additional access to secondary users. And those are the folks that are, I would assume, on a weekly basis, looking at these data that come in Tuesdays and Fridays of every week. So as a candidate takes an exam or takes a different exam, that information is automatically, after it's reported to the individual candidate, then automatically reported to the state. It also is reported to the prep program that goes directly into their system. So they'll have access to ETS Data Manager, and they may have a separate system built out just for the university that they're downloading those information, that information into. So they have those access points to be able to look at each candidate and to keep track of those candidates as they're matriculating the program.
Right, thank you so much.
Done, and then we're gonna kind of wrap this portion of it up and move to the next section.
Thank you. I just wanted a refresher. So the bridge is currently only for the elementary cert, is that correct?
It's currently for elementary education as well as Praxis 4, but there are several
okay.
that are coming out this summer as well as this fall.
Okay, like, would it be reasonable to expect that like all the Praxis 2s will end up having this, or like has ETS said anything about how many they're going to be offering bridges for?
So we have in the Praxis Battery 90+ exams.
Mm-hmm.
So it is likely not going to be feasible to create a Praxis Bridge module for all 90+ titles, but in Connecticut, you all use maybe 20-something plus exams.
Mm-hmm.
Those are typically the higher volume exams that are used across the nation. So it's conceivable that we're going to create a Praxis Bridge for all of the major titles.
Okay.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, you know, we have right now for elementary education and core, but we also are rolling it out for teaching reading, for other elementary exams, special education. There's some middle school exams on that. There are high school exams like social studies. So as we just continue to build the modules, we'll roll them in. And we have a schedule between now and winter or spring of 2026 that has about a dozen plus additional ones, and then we're just going to keep moving. So it's going to take a couple of years to build up this process, but we're producing them in our assessment development department as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you.
I can't remember ad hoc versus board sometimes, but I feel like the board already voted to accept current bridge options and any future versions of the bridge options as they become available.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And then
Thank-
my only, sorry,
Jen.
Jen, my only other thought is around, we also still have to discuss the ACTFL tests and what we're going to do there with the world language certification area too, regarding all of this. So I just wanted to put that on the table because we haven't gone back to that in a while with this group.
Thank you. All right, so thank you so much. We will see you at the next meeting for a deeper dive at that point. Thank you again. We appreciate the work that went into this. All right, so next on our agenda is our presentation for our first to third grade, SDE and CPRO. Who will be presenting for that?
Hi, everybody. I can get us started with that. Thanks to the board for welcoming us in today. My name is Ryan Caldwell. I'm the assistant dean here at the School of Education at Eastern. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Paige Bray, early childhood educator at the University of Hartford. And we also, I see on the call, some of our colleagues that we recently collaborated with from CPRL. So I'd just like to give a little bit of context for the conversation before I pass it off to Dr. Bray. Dr. Bray and I are here representing the Early Childhood Higher Education Consortium, or ECHEC for short. And our work with certification, we had a meeting at the end of last summer with Commissioner Russell Tucker and Commissioner Beth Bai regarding the early childhood ed certification. At that meeting last summer, we clarified that at the current time, the current 112 and 113 integrated early childhood endorsements were remaining in place. However, the commissioners also directed us to the Connecticut Educator Preparation and Certification Board, indicating that a complete comprehensive examination of educator preparation and certification was taking place, including an examination of early childhood licensure. So at that meeting, ECHEC talked to the commissioners, and we said we'd be happy to speak with and support the work of the certification board, and we would be, more than willing to join any potential future discussions related to early childhood, and particularly an integrated birth through 8 certification. And so that's part of what got us here today. Since that summer meeting, ECHEC, which is the group that represents all of the ECE educator preparation programs across the state, both certification and non-certification programs, has continued to meet with multiple constituents, from representatives from the State Department of Ed and the Office of Early Childhood. This is sort of the culmination of the work of the last year. And what we bring you today is a presentation about the birth to 8 space that includes diverse ages and diverse early childhood settings, and the full early childhood education workforce. The document that Dr. Bray is going to walk us through in her part of the presentation has been co-constructed with input from our State Department of Education colleagues, Office of Early Childhood colleagues, and most recently with a tremendous amount of collaborative support from our colleagues at CPRL. And so in terms of, before I turn it over, the document that Dr. Bray is going to talk through captures proposed changes in in early childhood certifications. So currently we have the 112 and 113. The intent of the presentation today is to present a draft that addresses the full scope and span of early childhood, early intervention, and education professional ECE span within the context of potentially one certificate. So Dr. Bray, I hope that gives everybody just kind of a sky-high overview. And Dr. Bray, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much for that overview. I am literally going to go through the document, not too slowly, but that you have, that was presented with the materials. Is that acceptable? Okay. And again, CPRL colleagues, feel free to jump in here. As Ryan has stated, the intent is to address the 112 and the 113. I think everyone here is used to the legislative code, which is brackets means it comes out, underline means it's added. So in the first paragraph, so the section 10.14.5D, when required, we have gone out to the full birth to 3 space, which includes infants, toddlers, and it should say infants, toddlers, early education, and preschool and kindergarten, because then we get that full span that's we used to call nursery, through grade 3 in the employment of the Board of Education. And this certificate ensures the use of inclusive, developmentally appropriate practices in public education settings that serve birth through school age children up through grade 3. So that is at the heart of the change, is just making that inclusive span the broader span. and that we've named the different ages then turning to grades as appropriate for the SDE language. I think I'm going to stop there. Do people have any questions? Because there's a few other things, but that's the gist of what we're putting forward. Okay, to move on.
Oh, I see, Kristen, sorry.
There you go.
Kristen?
Yeah, so I think from a union standpoint, let's say we have a certification that's birth to grade 3. Once an employee becomes a certified staff member, that means they fall under our bargaining unit and then would need to be paid accordingly. Is that something that you think would happen with this new certification?
I think that is an important point. I think that there are different bands. So if employed in an SDE setting, essentially people who already have the 112 and 113 are paid commensurately. I can't say more than that, but so yes, there is definitely a commitment at some point in hopefully my lifetime for more pay equity, but this legislation just makes sure, or this document makes sure to speak to the birth to grade 3 span and truly only covers the settings that we already know. Does that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Seeing none, please continue.
Okay. Thank you. So in the next section, we removed the language that says except that on and after July 1995. And then just made sure to keep in this language that basically says an early childhood educator will not also be the art teacher, the health teacher, the music teacher. So that's a provision that protects both those teachers' certifications and the early childhood people. And then you just see this replication of the language, birth to 3, birth to school age up through grade 3, and integrated being critical here too, that it is the general and special education classrooms. And then everything else in that paragraph is removed. Any questions about that, the span and it being integrated? And then there's really only 2 other relevant changes. So I promised I'm only being slow for ease. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a few questions. So thinking through, just in my situation with our current preschool, it is taught by certified teachers. And we also have certified art, music, and PE. Are you proposing that their certifications begin prior to pre-K? Right now, they would be pre-K 12 for those content areas.
No, well, this keeps intact as it is. And so the safeguard is that you wouldn't have a preschool teacher who also has to teach all those specials, and you wouldn't you wouldn't avoid having a physical education teacher in the pre-K set. So it is as it is. There's no change to the current practice. It's just the language makes sure that there wouldn't be a change to a current practice.
Yeah, we just cleaned it up a little because this hasn't been amended for a while. So there was this language hanging out there about after 1995. So we kept the substance of the requirement is the same. It's just cleaning up language here.
Okay, and then part 2, the elementary certification, which also includes K through 3, would remain intact as in this proposal. And the K6.
The K6, yes. I think that is addressed a little further at the end, but yes, we're not in any way trying to alter the bands that are in place right now in elementary or special ed.
Any question?
And again, team, jump in if there's added pieces. The next section is really just saying on or after July 1, 2028 would be the sunsetting of the 112 and 113. That's even though it would be effective 2026, it would be the sunsetting of the other endorsements. And then everything after that underlining in section B there is removed and would move into guidance, or the details would move into guidance. And so then the next section, again, stop me if I'm going too fast. I'm not later than July 1 would we develop the guidelines. So that's the part 2, as is the case for other things. And the speaking to the guidelines speaks to that birth to 3 span, teacher preparation, the endorsement, and adhering to the NAEYC professional standards. Everything after that, all the way down through that section would then be eliminated. Again, moving to guidance as needed. Team, anything else I missed that you want to highlight?
Well, so just to zoom out, so basically 112, 113 would be not issued after 2028 under this, but if you are a holder of one of those endorsement areas, you could be reissued your certificate after that. So it's basically grandfathered in. And then the specific sort of program related requirements that you see in there, as Paige just mentioned, would be something that would have to be established through guidelines. So this really just creates the new endorsement area, grandfathers in the people who had 112 and 113, and then requires the cert board to come up with the new guidelines for the new endorsement area.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Concerns or we want to address at this time?
Question, do other states have a certification that begins at birth?
I can say yes, and then defer to other people who may want to speak to that more thoroughly. But yes, in our immediate surrounding and in this country, yes.
Commonly have people coming from New York and they have a birth to grade 2.
Sorry, say that a little bit louder.
New York has a birth to grade 2.
New York has a birth to grade 2.
Mhm.
Okay, Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, Cynthia, at Relay, we run multiple, our entire ECE program is a birth to 3 program because multiple states do it. It's actually an interesting thing that Connecticut does not.
Else?
I could just add, from my experience in HR, I think this opens it up for employees and for teachers to have options if they want to. Except I remember when we had openings, I'd get calls, and based on their certification, it would be very difficult if people wanted to, go and teach 3rd grade. And so I think it just opens up opportunities for teachers, from my experience.
It was that flexibility that we're charged with creating, right?
Yeah.
With reinventing certification and preparation.
Right.
Feels like you have something on your mind, Sarah.
It's really just something I'm curious about. Are the EPPs revamping their training for this? This is it does create a lot of flexibility, and I'm glad Rebecca said that Relay is doing this and other states have done it, but have EPPs already started to change training for teachers who want this certification? That's one question, or that not, I'm just curious. It's not really part of our purview as board. I'm just curious.
I'll start. The intent here is to actually represent the full span that is being prepared. So some folks are preparing in the birth to 3 space, some all the way through birth through age 3, some all the way through the birth through grade 3, some focusing more on preschool to grade 3. But if all of that content that was bracketed has very particular guidelines in Connecticut already as to what content you need. So it would not, that hence the 2 years. There would need to be some adjustments to make sure that everybody had what they needed, but it is already pretty prescriptive in terms of the span of having the developmental knowledge. And so we have been in those conversations, to Ryan's talk, very actively for the last year and for some years before that.
And I can just jump in on Paige's comment there. So just speaking as Eastern is a very specific example, we had throughout this year, we kind of had that conversation because we know we have institutions that have different certifications right now. And so one of the reasons we talked about the 2 years and the 2028 turnover to the new issuing the new certification was to give time for that to take place. And I can speak from our early childhood faculty here. They knew that the potential is there for the change in the certification, but they expressed concern about the need for time for programmatic evolution based on this.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussions? So what I'm thinking is to allow people some time to process, and before we go on having this kind of move forward today, let's add it to our agenda as one of the things that we want to take action on, to allow everyone to read, take it in, read through it, allow some time for any questions to move forward at the next meeting. And at that point, if that's something that we want to do, we'll put it for a motion to vote on to move it forward to the State Board of Education as a possible policy change. That makes sense? Well, thank you very much. Did you want to say anything? I saw that you.
I just wanted to be here to be able to answer.
Oh, okay.
They did it as far as like timeline and programming, but it's just also important to note that we do have a 112 in this state, which is birth to K, students with or without disabilities. And both of our early childhood certificates are kind of locked off. We have our birth K, then we have our pre-KK elementary. We have 2 programs in the state of Connecticut that offer programming for 112 right now. And we have 3 for the 113. So there's definitely a need to revamp our programming in the state of Connecticut. A lot of our educators often seek programming outside of Connecticut. So they can, because there's programs around the country, and Rebecca spoke to this as well. They do birth to grade 3, other state students with or without disabilities. So an educator, other than the University of Hartford, who offers both programs, it makes more sense for them to seek education outside of Connecticut if they want to be certified birth grade 3 right now. So I just think that this will it would just open up the field a little bit more. And we do have institutions in this state that have strong early childhood programming. They might not have an educator preparation program, but they definitely have strong established departments.
Thank you so much. Sure. All right, so we'll put this for, oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
Very quickly, I just want to name, even within what she was just saying, is the reason why I have the birth to grade 3 programs in multiple states, and Relay does not have one in Connecticut because of the EPP pathways here in our own state. So I think it is it's exciting to see there's some potential move there, because there's some really great programs that just won't come to our state and we won't launch them here.
Sounds great. Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. We appreciate that perspective. All right. So in terms of our next one, we will move this to the June meeting to allow everybody to really digest this, read this through, come forward with any amendments to or adjustments that they want to have happen possibly. And then we'll make it an actual item at our June meeting to move forward to state education of that. thank you so much for presenting and doing this good work. The turnover time was about 3 to 4 weeks. You guys made it happen, so we really appreciate you and moving that forward. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. And we'll make sure that we with CPRO give you that amended language.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is an update on the CAPE agreement. Cynthia, who will be, and Lauren, who will speak to that. At our last, to give background, at our last meeting, we talked about the possibility of renegotiating and making our agreement specific to Connecticut or slightly, kind of check to see if it's something we wanted to move forward with or not, and how we wanted to move forward with. And Cynthia said that she was going to look into that.
And Lauren did.
Okay, and Lauren, perfect. And so they're gonna go ahead and just kind of give us an update on what that looks like. I believe that the agreement is up at the end of this year.
Next year, actually, April 2026. So
April 2026.
April, March. It's a year. Yeah, so it's April.
All right. And let's share a quick update on that and ask any questions, and maybe that will guide some of our work moving forward.
Where is actually gonna go? Can we move on to the next?
Sure.
Back to her.
Can, so I can go ahead and, because it's 6 and maybe 1. The next thing is a update from ad hoc. So for section 12A1, you just, heard this proposal, which we're going to kind of vote on. Go back. If you pull up this particular packet right here from CPRO that was in your materials, what you'll see is when we met, we talked about how we really needed to only provide criteria for the time being to meet our
Sorry, we're trying to solve the Praxis communication issue somehow.
all right. Immediate, yeah. It's okay, so we'll just move to that as the next thing, and then I'll go back to this. So we're doing is we're looking for just kind of an update on the CAPE agreement and how to move forward. We heard that
December
of 2026 or November?
November 2025.
November 2025. So, yeah. So it was a 5-year, the last one was 5 years. The one prior to that was 5 years. I'm out of breath.
Sorry.
No, it's no problem at all. So I just made some notes for myself. So our current agreement goes till November, and it's typically re-signed about 3 months prior to the expiration. So in that window, it's signed by the president of CAPE and the commissioner. So since our last agreement, CAPE has updated their language. So the old MOU has been revised for, all future contracts. So we, the deputy commissioner has a draft of the agreement that has the reflected current language that they use now, which is a little bit different than the last one. So the important things to remember is CAPE re-evaluates their standards every 7 years. So the current standards are standard 1, content and pedagogical knowledge, standard 2, clinical partnership and practice, standard 3, candidate recruitment, progression and support, standard 4, which you hear a lot about, is program impact, standard 5 is quality assurance system and continuous improvement, standard 6 is fiscal and administrative capacity, and then standard 7 is the record of compliance with Title IV of the higher education. What's important about that is the individual states don't have the ability to modify the CAPE standards. So the standards are the standards of that accrediting body. So for those of you in K-12, think about it like NEASC, right? So the NEASC standards, are what they are. And CAPE again accredits the entire EPP, the entire educator preparation provider. And they accredit at both the initial level and the advanced level. So initial level is those first-time certification programs when we think about teacher licensure or first-time educator, and advanced programs are those programs that lead to additional endorsements. So thinking about cost endorsements or administrative preparation, also things like school counseling, special services, that's all under the advanced standard. So the Deputy Commissioner has a draft of the agreement with the sort of current construct that we use. And it's also important to note that while CAPE is the accreditor, the state still has the responsibility for program approval. So I know when CEPO was making recommendations around updating those pieces of the regulations that pertain to educator preparation program approval, the old regulations referenced NCATE standards, which was the previous creditor, and talked about, updating it to be reflective of the CAPE standards. But sorry, it's just important to note, though, that the state still bears the responsibility of program approval at the end, predicated on that CAPE decision. And the current agreement, the one that expires in November, if you were to keep the same agreement for, let's say, the next 5 years, the current system is that the evaluation team composition is a CAPE-only team. And what that means is that CAPE assigns a team of typically about 5 trained reviewers, and it's comprised of EPP faculty and P12 practitioners, and that comprises the evaluation team. And then as far as program review options, the choices are a specialty program review with national recognition, which like the acronym is a SPA. So think, for example, a program leading to licensure for secondary English. The SPA for secondary English is NCTE, the National Council of Teachers of English. Programs leading to math licensure, the SPA is, NCTM, the National Council for Teachers of Math. Most disciplines have a SPA, but Connecticut has for 2 choices. They could do SPA recognition or what's called CAPE evidence review of standard 1. So EPPs currently have the choice. They can either do SPA or CAPE evidence of standard 1. That's the construct of the current agreement. And then the other option is that the MOU speaks to, is it talks about the dues structure, what the state's responsibility is for dues, access to the platform where everything is housed. And what's I think important to note is in a 5-year cycle, annually, the state can open up the agreement and make changes to it. So as this group is doing the work of looking at all of the pieces of teacher preparation, some states have, in addition to the standard CAPE process, a specific state addendum. So for example, recently at the last State Board of Education meeting, the Office of Dyslexia and Reading Disabilities literacy competencies were approved by the state board. And part of the charge of that office, for example, is to have, an audit process moving forward in the future as to how EPPs are complying with those competencies. Like that's something that could get built in to an addendum at a future point, that's something that's decided, or as this body works through what's going to replace the current regulations. Part of your thinking could be, in addition to the state in addition to rather the CAPE standards, are there additional metrics that you want EPPs to report out to? We have the flexibility of adding that in a state-specific addendum. And then what's just important to note about that is that's then not reviewed by CAPE. It would have to be reviewed by the department because CAPE only reviews the CAPE standard.
Actually looking at it right now, and it's pretty standard language. What I believe what's helpful for this group is as we start developing things, I think the amendment process will go kind of fit our needs, even just looking at this.
Yeah, it is
Just your MOU, yeah, it's not so specific.
Could we get a copy for the board of the previous MOU and the current one that's in draft, Commissioner, so we can kind of compare the two and kind of dig a little bit deeper into that and have the actual eyes on it?
So what I could do, I can get to Chloe, who can send it out to you, the previously signed one, and then the draft one that the Deputy Commissioner is referencing. Absolutely. So I'll send that to Chloe to send out to you. They've kind of tightened up the language. Because again, they're a newish entity. They've only been in existence 10 years. So that's why these are the revised standards. They started out with the set and then got revised.
And we would get a copy eventually of the revised standards from CAPE as well, so they can have any.
If they were last revised in 2022, so let's say in 2029, if they were to make any changes, the state's notified, all the EPPs are notified. Yeah.
So we'll get the previous MOU that had already been signed and in place for the past 5 years, and then the draft one that is sitting with the commissioner at this time for review. Does anyone else have any questions about that? Discussion. So could we, as soon as you get it, could Chloe send that to the whole board for review, and we'll put it on as an agenda item for discussion at the June meeting then? Because it sounds like if we're backdating 3 months for signage, isn't so August, which only leaves a little bit of time. So if we're able to get those into our hands, read them, and then have a discussion around anything that we might want to add or some feedback that we want to give to that, that would be a good time for us to try to have them say something. That sound appropriate?
I just want, just so you know, the process too, is that once even we've had things in place to the AG's office. So they're ultimately the ones who kind of like approve, even how it's first written into on our contract. So I'm gonna give you a heads up.
Thank you. I think for the purpose of our report that we have to give out to the State Board of Education, just having that idea that we've had the discussion here. We took a look at the old draft and new draft, and we provided feedback for AD or whomever would kind of satisfy the obligation of the board. So that is that. Next. Moving right on. All right, Public Acts 12A 1, 3, and 6, and CPRO will be assisting with this part of it. All right, so you have that packet in front of you from CPRO. And 12A1. So I'm going to go ahead and have people actually kind of begin the process of explaining if they're ready for that part of it. So we had a couple of conversations around this. And the ad hoc committee met as well and provided some feedback, which is the green that you're going to see in the document of additional items that we might need in there. But I'm going to let one of our representatives go through that process.
Yeah. So I'm going to hand it over to Tom, who's going to walk through, but basically for that first A1, it's about sort of proposing criteria for proposals that would come to the CERT board and state board for alternative pathways for both professional certification and cross endorsement. And so in the ad hoc committee, we had a discussion about what those criteria could be. We also presented some examples from other states, just by way of illustration, but for the purposes of your July 1 reporting obligation, it's really just deciding on those criteria. So Tong is going to walk through those. The memo you have, I don't know if it's in color, but there were some additions. We presented some criteria, and then there were some additions that were made based on the conversation committee. So we'll present the whole thing, but just to know that these reflect some of the feedback from the ad hoc committee.
It is in color, by the way.
Okay, great. Makes it easier. So Tom, do you want to walk us through?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shahrazad, and hi everyone. So, like Shahrazad mentioned, this memo kind of broadly addresses, 12A1, which is about criteria. So not evaluating the merits of certain pathways, but really what are the criteria that this board wants to put forward, so that this board and the SBE under Public Act 2021's kind of charge can jointly approve proposals to professional certification and cross endorsements that you guys will anticipate receiving in the future under that framework. So the first, so kind of it takes each each type of alternative in turn in terms of proposing the criteria. So you see, we start with professional educator certification, the criteria for assessing alternative pathways to professional educator certification. This topic, I think we discussed last time as well, and we stopped short of proposing concrete criteria, but we did discuss a lot of the alternatives to professional certification found in other states. And so this part of that memo is basically, I'll say, kind of like a recap of, what's the current state of affairs in Connecticut. You need a master's to progress to professional, the alternative pathways to other, alternative pathways to professional cert in other states, which, for recap purposes, again, national board, professional development points, completion of designated programs. These are the three I believe we talked about last time. These are the three common ones that we have found looking at other states' approaches. And then subsection C of section 2 is really where we kind of start to propose criteria for evaluating alternative pathways to professional certification. So this would be kind of a new section that we didn't really cover the last time we had this discussion here. And there obviously was a previous memo, if you recall, and that one doesn't cover this. So I can briefly walk you through. So these are criteria, they are, proposed criteria. They're non-exhaustive, and they are things that we've, in our analysis of what other states are doing and looking at the purpose of professional educator certification in Connecticut, right, came up with for your consideration. So there are four. The first is kind of the quality of the pathway provider or the supervisor. And that one really is kind of like a threshold question, right? It's kind of whether the provider, let's say somebody proposes that, a particular provider develops a program. Does that provider have what it takes kind of from a resources, admin, technical expertise perspective to implement that pathway with fidelity and successfully? So that we think is kind of an important criteria. The second is the quality of the proposed pathway. So that one speaks to the quality of the pathway itself, not kind of the provider, but kind of what are the merits of that pathway. Is it coherent from a programmatic perspective? Is it aligned to kind of research-backed principles? Does it use instructional methods that are effective? And I think the last bullet point, which is sort of, I understand it's kind of colored. So that one is the one that's kind of we talked about in the ad hoc committee. And it was a great kind of point that was raised by the ad hoc committee that we should also consider as part of quality when we're assessing quality, candidate competency at completion. That kind of speaks to ways you can kind of broadly assess that somebody has kind of completed that program. It's kind of drew inspiration from CAPE. So CAPE, as you know, there is a standard in there, candidate competency at completion. So really, whatever pathway that's proposed, there has to be a logical, a rigorous way of assessing candidate competency. The third is competency, at the end of the program. The third is accessibility of the proposed pathway. So that one is, as it says on its tin, is it affordable? The reasonableness in terms of time commitment. Some of these we kind of hear, and this is probably inspired by, when we talk about the masters, it is time intensive, resource intensive for certain populations, people who are maybe advanced in their career, have families and things like that. So that kind of speaks to that consideration. The last criteria is feasibility of implementation. That one, again, is something that was raised in the ad hoc committee. An important point about the feasibility of implementing a pathway. So for example, if a proposed pathway is kind of like a portfolio approach, right, then there has to be considerations in terms of, who gets to, do they have enough resources to implement, who's going to review it. And I think the important thing to note here, feasibility is kind of, it's almost like feasibility is a criteria, but it's feasibility weighed against kind of the merits of the pathway as a whole. So that's something that we kind of, as part of our, a proposed set of criteria, we think feasibility is not something that kind of exists in an abstract in a sense. So say, for example, and a good example, which we brought up before, is like Colorado, right? Like, yes, portfolios might be, quite rigorous, time intensive, but if it's research backed, are there, does the pathway demonstrate ways that they can kind of mitigate some of the effects, still make it feasible, whether it's a cap or things like that. So kind of, again, feasibility, but not in a vacuum, I think is kind of how we describe that criteria. So that's, I don't know whether it makes sense to stop here before I move on to cross endorsements, but those are our proposed criteria. Again, not exhaustive, for consideration. For your consideration.
Is there any discussion, or questions about that first closing? They're just reviews for endorsement.
Sorry?
In the ad hoc meeting, I'm sorry, in the ad hoc meeting, one of the things that, really came to and he just spoke to was, ensuring that it was aligned and crosswalk. Just wanted to make sure that these things were feasible and that they aligned and that we, weren't having to jump through more hoops as part of this process and then check box and areas for both EPPs. So that's for that. If you have any questions on the phone or online, so if you want to continue.
Okay, perfect. And if questions come about later, I can always address it then. So cross endorsements is really kind of the new kind of addition. So I don't think we've talked about this previously in our other memo. And so cross endorsements, as you know, in Connecticut, the after 2441, and for most subjects, just passing the appropriate SPE approved subject area assessment, so mostly the practice 2, will allow you to cross endorse. And obviously, it's important to note though that special ed, teaching English to speakers of other languages, bilingual, remedial reading, and sort of school library media specialists, those are accepted. So for those, you still have to complete the required coursework, which I think for a lot of them is 30 hours. But for the most part, it is kind of just a test. And so the way this part of the memo is kind of organized is we started kind of, again, similar to professional certification, we talk a bit about some of the alternative pathways that we've seen to cross endorsements in some other states that we thought is interesting, worth kind of looking at. And then we'll kind of go on into the criteria that we propose. So for alternative pathways, there are really two we thought that kind of stood out, they were interesting. The first is district professional development. So Wisconsin has a pathway to cross endorsements, which is job embedded. So it's basically, as long as you hold a license, so, initial license at least, or Wisconsin's equivalent of initial license, and you're employed in the school and have at least 1 year of full-time teaching experience. If you want to teach in another subject area that you're not licensed in, so to cross endorse basically in that school, in that same school system, there is a pathway called the LWS3. So what that does is that it's a 3-year non-renewable license that allows you to teach basically cross and you can teach in a subject that you're not currently licensed in for up to 3 years. And during those 3 years, you are meant to work with your school district who has the obligation to offer professional development that is timely, that is pegged to the content that you need to know to teach the new subject area. And then at the end of the 3 years, or I think right after the first year actually, so from right after the end of the first year, you have until the 3rd year to compile a portfolio that you can then submit to their state Department of Ed, and the portfolio obviously draws on the kind of evidence that you will accrue in your teaching, right? So as you're teaching this new subject, you're gaining experience, you're gaining artifacts, and you use that to create a portfolio working with the supervisor, mentor, whoever is sort of in charge of professional development in those districts, and then ultimately building a portfolio, giving it to the State Department, and once that's approved, you then are fully cross-endorsed in the new subject area at the end of 3 years. So it's a route to full licensure in the new subject area, and this we thought was kind of innovative way for a state to kind of offer as a pathway to cross endorsements, because it's job embedded. There's no additional cost. Obviously there's cost of the the review fees and things like that, but in terms of extraneous additional costs, it's really just professional development, working with your school system, building knowledge on the go, and then creating a portfolio that will be evaluated. So that's Wisconsin. The second example we thought of that we could find is kind of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is interesting because it's requirements for initial, like a base licensure and endorsement is the same as cross endorsements. But the reason why we singled it out is because it has actually multiple ways for initial endorsements, which their State Department explicitly encourages and states that it also applies to cross endorsements. So the two that came up that we thought were interesting, won't go over in detail here, but one is a portfolio. So again, if you can demonstrate through a portfolio and defend it, so this is a bit more kind of rigorous, but if you create a portfolio, defend it in front of an oral board, you then can cross endorse into the new subject area without the need for kind of assessments per se. And then national licensure. So obviously if you're national board certified in one area, even though that's not your subject area of current licensure, you can cross endorse that way. So that's New Hampshire. And then moving on to possible criteria for evaluating proposed alternative pathways to cross endorsements. Here, I think it's important, as with professional educator certification, to really kind of take a step back and think about what's the purpose of any kind of requirements for cross endorsements, right? So cross endorsements perform a similar function to initial endorsements in the sense that it's about making sure that you have a threshold level of content knowledge, general as well as subject specific teaching skills to teach in that content area, whether it's your first or your second. Obviously, the difference being this is catering to educators who are, quote unquote, seasoned in a sense. They have been teaching one subject area already. They have been working in the school systems. They know, the kind of the lay of the land, so to speak, in the school. So obviously there's that difference, but really it is about kind of, making sure that you can allow someone to demonstrate that they have the competency needed to teach a new subject area. So flowing from that, we have kind of 3 criteria for evaluating proposals for alternative pathways to cross endorsements. The first is extent to which the pathway facilitates demonstration of requisite competency. And you'll see some of the language there is really getting at, similar to when we are talking about kind of, educator minimum content knowledge and practice too, right? Are you showing, are there ways that this pathway facilitates candidate demonstration of those competencies? The second criteria is accessibility of proposed pathway. That one, similar to what I mentioned for professional certification, again, has to be affordable, reasonable in terms of time commitment, and kind of supports the development of a robust and diverse workforce, and align to state workforce needs. And then the third is feasibility. Again, that's similar to what I mentioned earlier, but again, to underscore that financial feasibility of that pathway, administrative feasibility of that pathway, and technical feasibility of that pathway weighed against, a more global view of the effectiveness or kind of the merits of that pathway is how we would frame feasibility. So yeah, I think that's kind of pretty much sums up, again, 2 sets of criteria, similar in some respects. They're all kind of involved with kind of validating what is needed to get to that threshold, to then be able to qualify you for professional cert or cross endorsements respectively, but with some differences, non-exhaustive, and kind of for your consideration. I don't know whether Shahrazad and Ben want to jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I would just say, again, those examples from other states are just there by way of illustration. That is not, the task before you now is not to decide on alternatives. The way the law is currently constructed, those alternatives would be proposed to you. And so really what you need to decide on now are the criteria that you would use to evaluate any proposals that come to you. So just the criteria basically that Tong went over is what is necessary to decide on by July.
That table on page 3 and page 9 is what we're really looking at this point to fulfill our statutory obligation. And then afterwards, we can, kind of provide additional guidance for that. But it's really page 3 and page 9. And just to give you an idea, and I feel like it was either spoken at an ad hoc committee or at the board meeting, but the cross endorsement process has actually evolved over time to be more flexible. Initially, you had to take a master's program, if I believe it was directly attached to whatever your undergrad was. Then it changed over time to you don't have to have a master's, but you can take a cross endorsement test on the majority of, not all, special ed TESOL, those kinds of things, you need additional coursework to kind of get there. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to remember this the best that I can from the multitude of meetings that we've had. So there's already some flexibility and it's already evolved to provide some flexibility in there. I think what we're just making sure is that we have some kind of criteria in place to basically develop.
Just to clarify, there
Sure,
are
go ahead, thank you.
two different ones. There's the required to advance to professional. That's where basically it was 30 credits beyond the bachelor's degree, and I'm talking about for teaching endorsements, because there's more than that for special services and administration. Endorsements was 30 credits beyond. Then legislation passed and said, no, you need a master's in your content area. And then the board then said, wait a minute, what if I'm a certified math teacher and I want to go to special ed and I want to get a master's in special ed, like I can't do this. Then they changed it and said the master's doesn't have to be in the exact same area, as long as the master's includes at least 15 credits in content or content pedagogy. So it opened it up so people could say, like, I'm a math and I want to get a master's in math because I want to be the best math teacher ever. But it also allows me to say, oh, I've been teaching math, but now I want to go to special ed. So it created more flexibility. That's different than the cross endorsement. The cross endorsement is the one that previously all the requirements included coursework, and it was typically 30 credits. And so there were very specific areas that had to be included in those 30 credits. So let's say I wanted to get a cross endorsement in English, I had to have 30 credits in English, but I had to have a secondary developmental reading course, and I had to have a, the history of education of English. There was and then we changed it. Instead of saying 30 credits and a test, we said just the test alone is going to show you the content by taking that test. So that's where that's changed. It's very prescriptive before, like for health, you had to take 30 credits in health and had to have, breakouts, drug and education in certain areas. Now they're just saying testing. So we're looking for other ways than testing. You don't get a master's at a cross endorsement. Just get a test. And previously you could have 30 credits and that would be a master's was only for advanced.
But it has become more flexible.
Like the master's degree for advancing has, right. You still need a master's degree, but it's more flexible as far as what degrees would be acceptable.
So the work of the board right now is really to just take a look at the criteria that you see on page 3 and page 9. And, decide if that's the criteria we want to move forward to vote on as part of our report to the state board. A couple minutes to kind of just review it. And then we'll take any discussion around it, questions, suggestions.
I'm just curious about specifically the quality of the provider or supervisor of the pathway. If it's something broad, like getting a master's degree or going back to the 30 credits that used to be the requirement to advance to professional, how do you do that across multiple providers? Kind of just making sure they're accredited as a constellation of options that a teacher would have to advance, as opposed to, like, you're not going to individually evaluate those providers.
Just to be clear, you're on page 3, section 2 that you're questioning.
Yeah, that's the first criteria.
Yeah, I think so. For that one, and I think Sunny, I probably should have kind of caveated just now. I guess like the first thing is these criteria, as with kind of any criteria of general applicability, it's really in a way dependent on the kind, like the nature of the proposal you receive will determine how it's applied in practice. And this is why I think kind of to Jen's point just now, that there will be a need for a process, there'll be need for guidance later to enumerate the examples, for example, that you might, serve as evidence. So in that one, it's really, but I guess you're right, kind of like Shannon, kind of to cover whoever is, and that's why we kind of put /supervisor, kind of whoever is implementing, who has a hand in kind of providing that program, designing that program, delivering that program, and it could be multiple, right? Again, depends on the nature of the pathway. And I think that goes for all the criteria. It won't be always a one-to-one, and I think it'll be hard to find one pathway that speaks to all of them directly. But these are just kind of yeah, they are criteria, but the way it's applied, I think will kind of vary depending on the nature of the pathway you receive. And I think it's also kind of almost like an iterative process, because I think as you get more and more proposals and you get to see the whole gamut of the kinds of proposals that you get, the way you think about applying these criteria, although each of them I think we still believe are important and should be addressed and should be looked into and considered, how it's actually applied and what kind of fits that box will change, I think, both over time and according to the nature of the pathway.
Any other questions, discussion? The Kristen's hand up. Kristen?
Yep. I think all of the items make sense. I just wanted a clarification for what technical feasibility would be as opposed to like financial feasibility or administrative feasibility. Do
Yeah.
you just mean for the candidate?
Well, so that would be kind of something like, again, so not an example that's pegged to any particular pathway I have in mind, but so financial, I think is fairly clear. Administrative is kind of more towards how that pathway or whatever is kind of will be run from like an operational perspective that is standalone from financial, I believe, although it's related, of course, but it's kind of, I think, speaks to a different kind of capacity. And then the technical is kind of what we're talking about is really kind of, let's say if it's a pathway, for example, that relies on, a new program or whatever, like the people who are delivering the program, for example, do they have the technical knowledge, or like the reviewers, right? If you're like reviewing, portfolios or whatever, who are the reviewers? Do they have the requisite knowledge, expertise necessary to implement? There's like a blunt example, but just basically it's kind of, it speaks to technical. You can read it in terms of content, but we don't use, I think, the word content because it, some pathways, cross endorsements might be content based, but professional cert, it's not. I mean, it is content, but it speaks to different kind of competency you're trying to validate, and as a result, the kind of expertise that you need to be able to implement varies. But does that answer your question? So it's more about like, you can think of it like, whoever's reviewing, do they have the content knowledge they need to review a portfolio, right? And so you see for some of the examples that we gave, in New Hampshire, for example, the oral board, there's actually a requirement that whoever sits on the board have to be certified X number of years, master teacher, whatever, in that subject area, gives them kind of the legitimacy to review portfolios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does that one kind of goes along with qualifications of faculty and personnel, right?
Well, I guess yes and no. I think, well, like, yeah, I definitely see there is the way when we were drafting it, there was overlap. I think there is overlap between quality of the provider and the feasibility. So that's why I said that was kind of not the best example. But I think those are different kinds of competency, and that one really speaks to kind of whether you, and I think this came up actually in the ad hoc discussion about, I think precisely about that point about the portfolio. So, and I guess the other way to look at it is like, the person who's implementing a pathway might not be the person who's reviewing, like for example, if it's in the portfolio case, it could be school, whatever ETT, whatever come with the portfolio, but the review is at the level of the State Department, right? So that wouldn't necessarily be like a provider issue. It would be like another involved body, if you will. I think that speaks to that.
Right. Thank you.
So I would cater a motion to put forward as part of our report two options. Put forward the criteria for both of these for our report to the State Board of Education. And or we table this to allow people to look at it more and see if there's any other questions they might have, or then us to take action on in the. Sure, go ahead, question.
Maybe it's just a title change because both tables possible criteria for evaluating proposed alternative pathways. Then on page 9, it's possible criteria for evaluating proposed alternative pathways. Tables are slightly different. So if they're different, I think the titles, so there's similarities, but there's differences. So the first table only has 4 parts, the second table has 3. I'm just not clear on why there's 2 tables.
I believe one is for our traditional routes, the other one is for our cross endorsement.
Okay.
Maybe we just need to have a.
Yeah, I think we should just be clear in the title of the 2 tables. You're right. On page 5, it does say cross endorsements. Yep.
We can, would you like us to, yeah, like.
We can
just do
change it,
some
yeah.
tweaks?
We can change it. As it currently sits, it's because it's under like a broader header of, but we can change it to make it clear.
Action of the board would like to say.
I'll make a motion that we approve the criteria today for the criteria for the alternate pathways to certification.
For both the regular pathway and the cross endorsement. You have a second on that?
A second.
There a second? Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
The only discussion I would add is that if we could amend the motion to say with the titles of the 2 charts changed.
Right, and to be clear, I don't think that we're proposing to submit the full CPRL report because it has suggested alternative routes in there that we have not approved. I think we're really just approving the 2 tables for criteria to move forward as part of our report with the title change. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
So do I have a second on that amendment? So moved. Okay, thank you. And is there any further discussion?
Sorry, can I just to say, like, just to clarify, those examples are not suggestions, as in those are just, I know you mention, it's not like we co-signed them, it's just, these are just examples that we found.
Understood, we just don't want anyone to kind of like read it and think that it's the board making those suggestions at this time, so.
Yeah, absolutely, okay.
So we've had that thoughtful kind of review. All right, so we have a second, is there any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry. Go
I
ahead,
just have
Catherine.
I have a question. So we are then voting to approve in that first chart on page 3. And we're voting to approve that as a pathway for certification? Is that
No, criteria.
a
Criteria to help us evaluate.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, you cut out.
Sorry, we're approving it as criteria. That's what we're voting on. It's just criteria. And then later on, we'll kind of like do any guidance that we need based on the program.
Okay, because it would be really interesting if we did do a crosswalk to make sure that it aligned with our CAPE standards, right?
We asked CPRL to do that crosswalk already for us.
Right, I thought I heard you say that, but for some reason, different pieces are getting cut out, so I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I get it. I'll try to speak a little closer to the microphone. I'll be a little bit closer. My apologies. All right, so the motion currently is to approve the criteria for endorsement and cross endorsement as listed in tables on page 3 and page 9 with the names adjusted or the titles adjusted to reflect cross endorsement versus endorsement. And we've already got a motion. Is there any further discussion on that? All right, let's put it to a vote then. All those in favor, raise your hand now. It's up to those not in favor, unselect. And those, Kristen, are you not in favor? Oh, sorry.
Nope, just left the hand up.
All right, so 1 not in favor and any abstentions? And isn't. All right, so the motion has passed then to move that forward. All right, as part of the update for 12A1, that was 1, 6 was already done, and we have it tabled for us to vote on after we get. And we actually voted to move the report forward with any additional information. So it's already taken care of there. 3, I believe we are still working on. So I'm going to move on to Public Act 1213A3, review and reporting on educator progression certification by Kristen.
All right, everyone. So unfortunately, I don't have the ability to share my screen really easily, so I don't believe you have this in front of you. But we scheduled 2 meetings for the ad hoc committee related to alternate minimum content knowledge assessment. The first meeting we ended up canceling because we didn't have a quorum. The second meeting we did have, we did not have a quorum, but decided that we needed to start reviewing things anyways, so that even though we couldn't move anything out of the committee and bring vetted proposals from the ad hoc committee to you, that we've at least addressed and discussed additional new routes for alternate minimum content knowledge since we last spoke. So we actually looked at 3 proposals, of which 2 had a very strong overlap. So we all agreed that the first way to show minimum content knowledge is to pass the state standardized test, whether it's the ACETL, the Praxis, etc. Then, as you know, we've approved the Praxis 2 bridges. We know those are expanding, and we hope that more students take advantage of the Praxis 2 bridge. So the remaining 3 proposals that we looked at, they were new. 1 was from me and 2 were from Rebecca Good. In my proposal, I had proposed that one pathway to show alternate minimum content knowledge assessment would be that for prospective educators who've met all other requirements for initial certification, except passing the content knowledge. So they've completed their EPP, they've done their all their coursework, they've done their student teaching, they've done any internships that might be required, and achieve a score within 3 standard errors of measurements of the cut score, that these prospective educators would be able to apply for a waiver through the State Department of Education. Based on those criteria, they would first need to show that they actually have met all the other requirements for certification, show they've received a score within 3 standard errors measurements of the cut score. Originally, I had proposed 20 full months or 2 years of successful, appropriate full-time teaching experience at a Connecticut public school, after which the superintendent or designee would sign an attestation showing that they do in the classroom exhibit minimum content knowledge. So in that proposal, some of the things that our ad hoc committee talked about was that 2 years might be difficult because a teacher could they could get riffed, they could have their content area fall off the list for durational shortage area permits. They could have had a poor fit with their existing school and now have to move to another school, and now they've wasted a year. And we talked about a number of reasons why 2 years might be very restrictive or hard to do as opposed to 1 year because of that necessity of being hired for a second year. We talked about whether the SD has the ability to collect this information and do and show that they've met content knowledge in this way. From EPPs, there was a question of how they would be able to get this information sent back to them. Catherine, is that a question for me?
My hand just came up automatically. Sorry about that.
That's
Wasn't even
okay.
touching it.
I think mine did that earlier. All right. So then the two proposals from Rebecca, I'm going to read her one that's very similar to mine first. So her proposal was that similarly, a candidate who's working as a teacher of record under a temporary license for 10 months, then the district would approve a waiver of their content knowledge assessment. Um, she was calling this a district approved waiver. And in both of the cases, we were using their performance in the classroom to show that they meet the minimum content knowledge assessment. In our discussions, Rebecca had talked about that for her idea for the district approved waiver, it would be for people who have also completed all their EPP requirements. So the differences between those two, mine I had originally proposed for 2 years and had a cutoff of you had to be within three SEMs of the cut score. Rebecca's was for a shorter time and was for had no listed minimum for the minimum score on the Praxis or other standardized test. Hers had those waivers submitted to the SDE, so no further review would be necessary. And both of ours agreed that once the waiver was complete, there would be no need for the student to go back and pay to take the Praxis 2 or other standardized tests again, and that would fulfill their minimum content knowledge. The third option we talked about was the EPP approved waiver. And this was one of Rebecca's proposals where she had said the candidate would complete extra coursework or support as determined by the EPP. And on behalf of the student, the EPP would submit a waiver as part of their recommendation for certification to the state. Some concerns that were listed with this particular, the EPP approved waiver is that it similarly did not have like a minimum range for a cut score. There were some questions about feasibility and cost, both to the student and to the EPP, because if the student needed to come back and complete extra coursework, we had questions about whether this would have extra tuition. I know that from some of the EPPs, there was a question about the feasibility of providing support to a teacher that might have been away from their program for a long time and now they're going to come back. So there were several questions about the EPP approved waiver. But I think all in all, we had really good productive discussions, even if I can't come to you today with a specific item that has, been approved by the ad hoc committee. So what I'd like to do instead, with your permission, is under the agenda for actions, items requiring action stemming from ad hoc committee. I do have a motion that I would like to make under that section that combines both Rebecca Good's idea and my idea, and kind of combines the best of both worlds. I think this is something that, given our time left today, might be good to propose, have discussion, and ask questions. And either we can vote on it today, or if we want to vote to table it to another meeting. The only one of the reasons that I want to propose this today, as opposed to waiting for too much longer, is I know that we have suggested to the Education Committee language about us having this alternative minimum content knowledge assessment, ready to go for July 1 of this year. So given our timeline and how we would need to approve this through State Board of Ed, how we would need to work to get this worded in the way of regulations or guidelines or some other more official than, a motion that I can make right here, right now. Given our timeline, I think it makes sense to at least review it today, be able to get some discussion in, so that we're not pushing this obligation too far down the line. Would you like me to wait until item item 6 on the agenda in order to make that motion, because I know, Jen, you have other, you have Public Act 13B that you want to review as well.
Public Act 13B update on it is going to be really quick. So if we don't do it now, I can always do it at the next meeting. It's not going to require a substantial amount of discussion or action taken on it. So if you want to do that at this time, we can always table early 13B to the next meeting, or I can send kind of like a general email update to the board on thoughts around that.
Yes. Oh, geez, thank you so much for your flexibility. I have emailed the full wording of this motion to Chloe, and I don't know if it's able to have it posted to the screen so that you don't have to worry about reading it out loud right now. Okay.
Up on the screen, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I move everything that's currently on the screen. But let me talk to it first so that in case there's someone who wants to second or we want to get to discussion. One of the questions we had discussed under the 3 standard error measurements discussion was that what if you had a test where the SEM was only 2 points, right? What if you had an SEM whose that was very small and it limited the number of teachers who were eligible? So there was a discussion on whether that minimum should be based on the SEM or a percentage of the cut score. So a compromise that I thought would make sense would be that there is still a minimum that students would need to be able to show they know the content knowledge at least this well within 3 standard errors of measurement or 15% of the cut score, whichever is the larger. And by larger, I mean that the broader scope. Like before, I was keeping the language for all other requirements for initial certification except passing the content knowledge assessment. So in my head, this reads as they've graduated from their EPP, they've completed their coursework, they've done their student teaching, and this work experience would be beyond their student teaching experience. So I would not count in this case, their student teaching would not count towards that 10 months, 1 year, because they would need to have met all other requirements for certification first. Then I think the discussion about 1 year versus 2 years, I think that was really important because, if you've been teaching for 15 years, you're like, 2 years, but there are significant barriers from just getting from 1 year to 2. Getting hired for 1 year does not mean you'll stay in the same district for the next year. So I'd be happy to, and then not written on there, there was a question from EPPs on how they would be able to get this data, right? And that's actually why I asked the question about how EPPs get their data for students who have already graduated a long time ago. And when they do pass their Praxis 2, how do they get this information? So they currently get it from a portal they can log into, but EPPs also do have access to the EdSite website. So if this is a pathway, it's established as a pathway, we could use the EdSite website as a way for EPPs to see that a student has achieved this alternative minimum content knowledge pathway. They'd be able to log in and see which ones of their students have passed the Praxis 2, which ones have passed by waiver option. So I think that presentation from EdSite was really useful. I didn't write that into this motion because I wrote the motion before seeing the EdSite proposal or EdSite workshop.
Looks like we have a question. Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you for all that information. So I think I have two questions at the forefront of my mind right now, or actually maybe one question and one comment. So if we were to do this, I am in full support of the 10 months rather than the 12 to the 2 years. And I think because I have a unique perspective of every candidate comes into our program already having passed the praxis too with the current cut scores. So we actually see how that works, how that comes to fruition once they're actually in the program and in student teaching. And about 60% of our candidates are in a DSAP as well. They already passed the praxis, as an entrance requirement. So we see it go both ways, where somebody just passed by the skin of their teeth, but they're doing great on being assessed on content knowledge all throughout our program and then in the classroom during practicum. And we see surprisingly more the other way around where, as I said, everybody passed, but then when it comes time to perform, they may not have an area of their content down very strongly. Like we train tech ed, we train business, we train family and consumer science. And so you may have a business teacher who's really great in maybe marketing or accounting, and then they get into practicum and they're assigned courses that they really haven't studied since their bachelor's degree. But they passed it, the few questions or that segment, they passed it on the praxis too, so I think we have to consider that where we have a lot of, history is another one. You could teach all kinds of history, but there's just there's a lot of depth to the coursework versus passing the praxis too, right? So I like the idea of the 1 year because you know right away when they start working and what courses they're assigned. The difference is, when they get into a school, they're given their assignment for their coursework when they're hired and they have all summer to prepare versus when they go into a practicum with us and they just found out a few weeks before and now they got to go teach it. So I really like the 10-month idea because I've seen that happen with us even in the 8 weeks, where once they're highly supported, we can get that content area knowledge up. So I like that. I like that change that you guys decided on. Go ahead.
Oh, and so this one is my personal proposal, based on the conversations we had in the ad hoc. I don't want to give the impression that the ad hoc is putting this forward. This is my proposal as an individual.
Okay.
We didn't have a chance to meet with enough members to be able to
right,
vote
you had said
approval.
that.
So
I'm speaking to the 10-month that this is why I'm supporting it because we already get to see that in my program because they came in passing the praxis, but they may be assigned a course that they're not so brushed up on. And we're seeing some content issues in the beginning, but then they can catch up and you would be able to see that in the 10 months. And then the question I had was, where was the 15% coming from? Like, is there some kind of methodological approach that is research-based that's coming from?
Yeah, I actually took it from Malik, who was presenting earlier or answering questions earlier from ETS, had shared a set of slides showing how many students were bridge eligible for a large number of tests. Actually, all of the tests that ETS is planning to make Praxis Bridges for out through spring 26. So when I was looking at those numbers, I used them to figure out that one SEM would be 5% of candidates, right? So based on student performance, one SEM was roughly 5% of candidates. And I know it's not a perfect assumption, but if one SEM is 5%, then 3 SEMs is going to be about 15%. Of course, with the data that I have, I'm not sure that that would be precisely linear as a correlation. So the 15 is coming from 3 SEMs. And then, you had mentioned once you're assigned to, teach full time, that there is some mentorship and there is some evaluation and there are people that help you through. The reason I put in the specification for Connecticut Public School is that
Mhm.
public schools are required to evaluate their teachers and required to do so based on a state, um, not a standardized state assessment program, but they have to have their evaluation program approved by the state. Whereas private schools don't necessarily have to do the same evaluation. So I did put in that because I wanted some aspect of this teaching experience to be supervised with observations, with a person that can help these new teachers get accustomed to teaching. And you had mentioned history. You know, history, you can teach psychology, you can teach
Yeah.
sociology, you could teach US history or modern Euro. So that's why that specification was put in there.
I would just say I would like to just caution against maybe using a percentage only because like we know that standard error of measure, you know, quantitatively in the descriptive statistics and et cetera, for each test that they give, we know what that number is on either side of the cut score. And so that would be different for every test. So we would have those numbers. So I like the idea of three or however many number, how whatever increment of standard error of measure we select, but at least it's a universally methodologically statistical approach for every single assessment. So I would like to caution against using like a 15%, for example, but I'd like to hear others thinking on that. I'm just thinking of just data statistics like standard 5 of CAPE, for example, things of that nature.
We move to Anne. Does anyone have a question?
Oh, this is, I do. This is after they've tried passing.
Correct. So it's Praxis, it's bridge, and then this is, if there is not a bridge option, there's option. Or they didn't pass the bridge option, this option, right? So it's kind of to fulfill for those who either have a bridge option is my understanding, and for those who didn't pass the bridge option as well. So that's part of that multiple ways of showing minimum content knowledge.
Because I'm picturing that, let's say I do a subject in which there is a bridge available, but I don't get within 1 SEM, I get within 2.8 SEMs, then I can continue to take the praxis again, but there's many people who are already working under a DSAP, getting all of that good experience and support. So we wanted to keep in mind the people who don't get close enough for the bridge, or as was mentioned earlier with the AIFSTL, one where a bridge isn't available and is not likely to be available.
Yeah, because I was
Anne,
looking
go
at-
ahead.
Oh,
Sorry, Jen, we're going to go to Anne now. Anne, go ahead.
Thank you. The issue that I have with this is really an issue of who's responsible for making this final distinction for a candidate to go to certification. And technically, always, it's usually the EPP that does that. Who's doing it now? So I have a student, they don't pass, they don't have an option for bridge, they get a DSAP, they're teaching. Is that coming back to the EPP to certify the candidate for certification, or is now the district doing that?
So the way I'm seeing this, Anne, so let's say you had a candidate that, you know, a few years later after they leave your program, they do pass the Praxis 2 and they plan to submit paperwork to do their initial certification. They currently go back to you currently, right?
They do.
They do.
But that's,
So
I'm making that decision based on existing standards of the test. In this case, the responsibility over to the school and letting them make that decision. And I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with that. I really feel that the candidate, if I have to sign off on the candidate, I want to know what I'm signing off on. At least with the standardized test, there's a standard at which I'm signing off on. In this case, it's a district making a decision based on 10 months of teaching, which may or may not, in my mind, be the standard that I want to hold for my candidates. So it is a giving over, it's a change in responsibility. I'm not saying either way how I feel about it right now, but I am, because I understand you want an alternative, but this really does shift the EPP responsibility in a way that I think is more significant than people are addressing.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to have some sort of minimum score achieved within 3 standard errors of measurement over 15%. So it's not, there's not no basis in content knowledge. You do have some measure that is standardized, that's based on, you know, an assessment that is, oh gosh, objective. Sometimes I mix up objective and subjective, sorry. But that is why I thought it was important to include that second criteria, that it had to be for people that did score within a certain percentage of the cut score.
Although that's a pretty high percentage in my mind. That's
Before we go to Jen, we're going to go to Sarah.
I also think the proposal is much better with 10-month versus 2-year. But and this kind of follows along with what Ann was just saying. And I don't know if it's in the purview of the committee or the board, but it does seem like the 10 months of successful, appropriate full-time teaching experience, do we need to more clearly define what successful, appropriate teaching experience is for that 10-month period? Because then the next bullet, the editation from the district superintendent or designee, they're going to need some criteria in order to make that decision. So do we as a committee or a board need to make that criteria? Not comfortable with just the word successful because I feel like that's just too.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also add on the other end too, and for the candidate, let's say the school district doesn't feel they demonstrated appropriate success, you know, you need specific guidelines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so thank you for that feedback. We're going to go to Jen and then Catherine.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Maybe I want to
see
try
you.
to ease people's minds, maybe. So we've been doing this since the inception of ARC here. So every graduate from ARC for 30 years graduates with a 90-day certification. And then that's we've done our part. Now they go into the schools and they start working. And the school district, now they have 90 days, not even 10 months. They only have 90 days to prove their skills, and and one of those things is content knowledge. And then the district is fully capable of saying whether or not that person is ready for initial cert, and then they give them initial cert. And there are situations where maybe somebody doesn't get that beyond that 90-day cert for whatever reason, and the district handles it on their end from there. So the bottom line is we're training people to be in classrooms and start working. And the only people who can see that, we have people who certify when they leave our program certified, and they may not make it past the first 90 days or year and may be released from their position. So there are the school districts and the State Department of Ed have so many measures in place to say whether or not a person is ready once they're in front of the kids and doing the job. And I think that's exactly what this is doing. But in our situation, we only have the 90 days. This is actually a more generous approach, and gives administrators a lot more time to assess them. So that may or may not ease some minds, but that's how we've been doing it forever. And we don't have any, there's no checklist, there's no restrictions. It's in their hands once they're there. Granted, the people have passed the praxis too, but if this were to change, we would be looking at changing our entrance requirements as well. because then they
So,
could take another path. So.
Thank you, Jen. Catherine, before I go to you, I didn't realize we had a hand up over here as well. So in person, so go ahead, Patrice.
Back when I first raised my hand,
I'm so sorry.
when we first started talking about, my question being, is the attestation of the superintendent to the all three previous bullets? And are we now leaving out the State Department of Education in this process? And if so, I would be very concerned about this.
I was in my head, I was reading this as the superintendent is attesting that they completed 1 year of successful, appropriate full-time teaching experience. So beyond like what the form would look like for the superintendent or designee, I've not come up with what that form might look like. But I'm thinking that all the other requirements for initial certification would go to the state. I know the scores for standardized testing automatically go to the state. So then the waiver would be, or the attestation would be attesting to that experience.
That's not obviously the way it currently reads.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Is
Thank you
anyone
for
else
your
in person?
suggestion.
Catherine, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So right now, this is, and thank you, Kristen, for pulling this together to brainstorm. I think that it was a well-developed plan. So this is based on the premise that they're employed. I have candidates that have been unable to pass their praxis, that because they're not certified, they are not working. So they're working as paraprofessionals or in another capacity completely. So that's a limitation of this proposal. The other piece, I just want to loop back. I don't know that I want to submit, for quality assurance reasons, I don't know that I want to submit failing scores to CAPE within 3 standard errors of measurement to demonstrate professional or content knowledge, right? So even though I know that we'll have to score, I'm going to be submitting now scores that are maybe 3 standard or SEMs below the cut score. And that does speak to quality assurance. That does speak to my standard 1. These are the standards we need to meet with these criteria or these measures. The other piece is, and this is what Anne was trying to get to, the EPP, right? And may always change. I mean, things are changing. That goes back to Rebecca's vision board, right? So the EPPs right now are responsible, if you go through an EPP, for certification. So this is fine. Now you're saying in one breath, they're going to go through an educated preparation program. But then what you're saying is they're going to go through an educated preparation program, but now they're going to enter an alternate path for certification. And for me, that's the sticky wicket, where now we are going to be reliable. We're going to be responsible for these candidates, and who's going to sign off on it? Because, it's going to be looped right back to us. So we have to have the impact. So I think that, do they graduate and then we don't certify them? And once we don't certify them, then do they move into a alternate pathway certificate or pathway, or a temporary, like Jed said, maybe like a temporary 90-day pathway or license, and then they go into this type of a scenario? I mean, because we need to cut that tie then, if they're going to move into a different pathway.
I think for the purpose of this meeting, because we're at the 4:00 time, I think what we need to do is we need to take that kind of information that you heard in the discussion and take it back to the ad hoc committee and see if something can be adjusted or altered in some way with the feedback that was heard today.
I would be
And
happy
we can
to do
have
that.
that as an potentially actionable item on our June
Yes, in which case I move to table everything that used to be up on the screen.
Do we have a second?
I
Okay,
second
also
your
some
motion.
seconds.
I
All
second your
right,
motion.
any
Kristen.
further discussion?
I was just gonna say in relation to what Dr. Rowe just said, yes, that is true. We at ARC, we do get to cut the tie, and then it is truly in the hands of the district. So I do understand that concern and sentiment, of course.
So, all those in favor of tabling the motion to the June meeting, raise your hand now. We have a unanimous, so it passes. Thank you. And we look forward to hearing more about this and the others at the June meeting. So we have also, I will write an update afterwards, at the June meeting for 13B, because it's really straightforward and doesn't require a lot of, talking, but we do have public participation. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Malik is still here from ETS and he just offered that if the ad hoc meeting would like, what kind of person, the SEM expert, if you will, of ETS to sort of explain how that works and
Did you hear that, Kristen?
that they would
Yes,
be
that would
willing
be
to
great.
attend to have a better understanding as you're making these decisions of like what that actually means and.
Kristen says yes, and she'll ask Chloe to invite him to the next ad hoc meeting. I appreciate that.
To have that expertise, it might help me.
Absolutely, 100%.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right, so then what we have now is, I think we've taken action, all the things that we needed to take action on as part of the updates. So what we have is we have our July deadlines, but honestly, I can send that in an email for review. When we move to public participation, we do have somebody who's been waiting very patiently here. Thank you so much. Go ahead and come to the end there for public participation. Out to email.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will just take my 3 minutes because I know I'm the thing between you and the end of this meeting and the mental health provider. And we know that some of you have not stood up. So if you want to be standing during my 3 minutes, please feel free to stand and stretch. I really appreciate your time. My name is Dr. Ravid Stein. I'm a citizen of Connecticut. I'm a certified school psychologist through Connecticut. I'm a licensed psychologist through the Department of Public Health. I'm a board certified behavior analyst through the Department of Health. I work for EastCon. I have a joint appointment as a research associate and adjunct professor at the NEAC school. And I have the privilege of thank you for taking me up on standing. I have the privilege of serving through the REST Alliance and the CSDE as the facilitator of the communities of practice for BCBAs in Connecticut. So that is a few pieces about me. I'm here today because as the facilitator of that COP, Community of Practice, there are more than 275 BCBAs that are working in public schools in Connecticut. I'm one of maybe 10 BCBAs that worked in public schools back in 2010. And now there are more than 275. And those BCBAs are often cross-certified, such as myself, as O70s or school psychologists or special educators or other CSDE certs. But many BCBAs who have masters in special education or applied behavior analysis or a combination of both come to schools with a licensed behavior analyst certification, which is through the Department of Public Health. And they are working in schools for many, many years, and they don't have a professional pathway to move into leadership. They cannot go to 092 programs. They cannot pursue an administrative or school leader opportunity because as an LBA through the Department of Public Health, the current definition in the regs around pursuing an 092 intermediate administrator is 5 years or 50 months of service under a certification through CSDE. So my proposal today, in short, is given the role that BCBAs, board certified behavior analysts, have in public schools in addressing many mental health and behavioral needs that have come to this board and to the legislation, and the huge movement in the legislation and in our state to bring students back to district to their least
restrictive environment and support them in that environment, and the role that BCBA's play in that, the need to have board certified behavior analysts who can move towards official, not just pseudo administrative positions in their schools is supported by the fact that they cannot apply for administrative certification. So the proposal on the table is to ask if the 50 months of service that board certified behavior analysts serve in public schools as an LBA, licensed behavior analyst through the Department of Public Health, could be the definition of 50 months of service could be broadened to include that 50 months of LBA service in order to better meet the needs of students in schools. And also BCBAs who participate in education don't have a professional pathway in schools. And we know that a professional pathway for professional growth is even more important than money for people to remain and sustain in education. And so they leave education and they go to APSEPs where they can be directors and they can be high-level administrators. APSEPs are outplacements for students with complex needs that do not require CSDE certs for leadership positions. So I'm hopeful the board would consider that proposal to broaden the definition of 50 months of service.
Thank you. So, any questions for?
Not a question, but is it appropriate to ask that this item be placed on a future agenda for this group?
I would go so far as to say, if we would like to have this placed on a future agenda, that maybe we have to do some research on it in terms of what this looks like in other states. And
pros and cons
of that.
As well as, I don't know whether there are any restrictions within TRB in terms of eligibility. If we were to take care of the certification piece, is there something else that needs to happen so that they may be eligible?
And to be clear, I'm actually not asking that there be a CSDE certification developed for BCBAs through so that TRB does not have to even be involved. I'm just asking that the regulations for 50 months of service be broadened to define 50 months of service as an LBA. In looking through the research in the 50 other states where BCBAs have pathways to ed leadership through their LBA, but not pathways to a CSDE cert, it's been clearer that just offering the opportunity for BCBAs to go towards higher education is what more states have moved towards. Because I know that I had written that TRB is this is a more targeted